Chapter 1837. The two chatted and watched for a long time. Finally, Xia Shaochan said, "The essence blood of the Mermaid Emperor, 9.8 million for a bottle. Oh my god, I want this. A 6th grade soul pill, 5 million for a single one. After taking it, it can generate chaotic power, which is said to increase the power of the soul by 10%. Unfortunately, you can only take one. Ha! The deep sea spirit spring I saw also has the effect of improving and stabilizing the soul. It's only 10,000 ultra-quality spiritual stones per kilogram." Seeing the two of them talking to each other, it felt like the resources of the entire store were already theirs. After a long time, the two of them slowly came back to themselves. Han Fei's body was hot and he felt that his nose was about to bleed. If possible, Han Fei really wanted to buy all these resources. However, after the enthusiasm, the two of them found that they couldn't be too crazy when buying things. The two of them calculated that if they bought all the resources they wanted, they wouldn't be able to afford it even if they had 1 billion yuan. So, in the end, the two of them compromised with money. After struggling for half a day, it was already late. There were more and more customers in the store. Although cultivators never distinguished between day and night. However, the night was quiet and people would always seek excitement and excitement. This was especially true in the martial emperor city. At this moment, the auction was about to begin. All the restaurants were opening for business. There were also a steady stream of people in the mission center. The number of people in Han Fei's super resource store was also several times more than during the day. Ring, just when many people were selecting some resources that they thought would be of great help to them, they heard a tinkling sound. Then, they saw a man and a woman, carrying a lot of jade slips, walking over. The man looked ordinary, but his temperament was amazing. The woman, on the other hand, was extremely beautiful. She did not seem to be a beauty that should be in the mortal world. Ha! They are Han Fei from the Avengers. And the princess of the mermaid royal family? Is this the Han Fei who dared to fight the Wuji Sky Fleet head-on? Someone secretly said, "Didn't he run away?" Wen sneered. "What do you know? He defeated Li Xinghan and escaped safely from Bei Xianbing." Someone sighed. "Isn't it because of the Gemini divine technique of the Yin-Yang heaven? That Gemini divine art, known as the chaotic vast sea, is best at escaping, so it's normal for him to be able to escape." Someone sighed. "It seems that the Yin-Yang true form is about to reappear in the chaotic azure sea. Otherwise, why would Han Fei dare to make such a big fuss?" However, Han Fei and Xia Shaochan had no time to care about what these people were discussing. The two of them carried a pile of jade slips. Their minds were filled with the value of these things. The checkout area was huge. For example, the shell of the primordial mystic horseshoe crab that Han Fei wanted had to be hammered. The problem of quality was shown on the spot. Once he left the store, no matter what happened, it would have nothing to do with the super resource store. Han Fei threw a pile of jade slips over. Very soon, there were people in charge of the delivery of the products. The waiters lined up one after another to deliver resources to Han Fei. Someone exclaimed, "Isn't that the shell of the primordial black horseshoe crab? That thing has been hanging there for hundreds of years and no one has touched it. How can it be sold today?" Someone asked doubtfully, "Isn't it said that the primordial mystic centipede shell armor is extremely difficult to forge?" This was said by the person from the thunder fire sky. He said that the shell has its own heaven and earth spiritual array, and if you're not careful, the array will be destroyed. What's the use of buying this thing? Immediately afterward, someone suddenly exclaimed, "What's that green cattail leaf fan? Is it the divine demon vine leaf?" Wow! It's the divine demon vine leaf, 3 million ultra-quality spiritual stones per leaf. This one is particularly bright, and there are 9 of them. How fucking rich is he? Gulp. Many people gulped down their saliva. The value of these two items had already exceeded 30 million ultra-quality spiritual stones. This was simply taking money and not treating it as money. Han Fei couldn't pretend that he could understand it at first glance. Even if he was pretending, he had to give it a try. Han Fei knocked a few times on the shell armor with an ultra-quality divine weapon. Then, he chopped a few more times on the divine demon vine leaf before putting it into the sun moon shell. He took out 20 spiritual fruits like the dragon blood fruit at once. Although this caused a small commotion, it was still far from the previous two. However, when the demonic essence of a half-king appeared, a group of sea demons and even mermaids exclaimed. Half-king demonic essence? No, it's a half-king merman pearl. If I remember correctly, one can only be bought for 2 million ultra-quality spiritual stones or more. Besides, if it's not an ultimate cultivation method, I'm afraid this half-king merman pearl won't be very useful. If it's someone else, I'm afraid the effect will be greatly reduced. Immediately afterward, everyone became more and more shocked. Oh my god! A 6th grade soul pill. There are only 3 of them in the resource store, each priced at 5 million, which is enough to buy a sea-quelling bizarre treasure. The essence blood of the mermaid emperor. This thing was priced at 12 million and hasn't been sold for more than 900 years. Now it's selling too. Is that the azure dragon tendon? Oh my god, a dozen. Are you going to buy so many to weave a net? At the checkout place, more and more onlookers gathered. Even if it was just to watch the rich guy buy things, they refused to leave. Xia Shaochan asked Han Fei via voice transmission, do we really have enough money? Han Fei nodded. Don't panic. Yes. It's definitely enough. In such a big checkout scene, number 203 even felt the gaze of a king. Number 203 quoted the prices one by one. Ancient Mystic Centipede Shell Armor, 3.98 million. Dragon Blood Fruit 2 million. 10 Half-King Merman Pearls, 13.1 million in total. 1 bottle of Essence Blood of the Mermaid Emperor, 9.8 million. 11 King Tendons, 23.06 million in total. 3 6th grade soul pills, 15 million in total. 500 caddies of deep sea spirit spring, 5 million in total. 9 petals of divine demon vine leaves, 3 million in total. 27 million in total. After that, number 203 looked up at Han Fei and said with a smile, Captain Han Fei, the total amount is 94 million. I'll give you a 30% discount, and the total price is 25 million. I'll erase the remainder for you. Wow, gulp. This is what a rich man should be like. His financial strength is no less than that of the top 10 pirate groups. Someone sneered. Not less. How can the top 10 pirate groups be so rich? That money has to be distributed to so many people. Someone snorted. What do you know? Which captain of the top 10 pirate groups is worth less than 100 million? Han Fei naturally had no time to listen to these people's discussion. When he paid the money, his face turned green. After all, he had accidentally bought too much. It was more than 27 million, more than 42 million. This was the largest transaction in Han Fei's history. Han Fei said, can I exchange it with an ultra-quality spiritual weapon? Number 203 was taken aback for a moment, then smiled and said, of course. However, it must be an ultra-quality spiritual weapon at least. Our super resource store will not accept anything lower than the quality of an ultra-quality spiritual weapon. Han Fei nodded slightly and issued an order in his heart. Clang! 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 In front of him, a large number of top-grade divine weapons were piled up like a mountain on the ground. There were as many as 3,000 of them. Number 203 didn't expect that Han Fei would take out so many ultra-quality divine weapons at once. Even the Thunder Fire Sky couldn't take out so many ultra-quality divine weapons at once. It must be noted that the refining of an ultra-quality divine weapon required a professional refiner to refine it for several months. Some refiners with poor refining skills even needed several years, decades, or even hundreds of years to refine. Han Fei casually took out more than 3,000 pieces. Who wouldn't be shocked? However, number 203 was very happy that Han Fei took out ultra-quality divine weapons to make up for it. These sea expansion realm materials were too difficult to sell. However, ultra-quality divine weapons were too easy to sell. Besides, the purchase price was not high, and the average price was less than 25,000 ultra-quality spiritual stones. The difference in price was much better than simply selling sea expansion realm materials. Before the appraisers who had been prepared started to appraise, they suddenly saw a middle-aged man appear at the transaction site. As soon as this middle-aged man appeared, the people in number 203 immediately bowed to him. Lord Yu. The man nodded slightly. Xia Shaochan said to Han Fei via voice transmission, by Yu, people call him Lord Yu. I only know that he is one of the kings of the martial emperor city. Bai Yu glanced at Xia Shaochan and said, I'll personally select these resources. He saw the mountain-like supreme-grade divine weapons flying past. It only took half an hour for Bai Yu to count them. Then he took a deep look at Han Fei and said, a total of 3,000 pieces, priced at 24,000 ultra-quality spiritual stones per piece. Do you have any objections? Han Fei shook his head. No. Han Fei didn't take out some of his common weapons. These 3,000 pieces were all of average quality, which was why he took them out. Of course, they were all ultra-quality divine weapons, so their quality wouldn't be bad. Bai Yu said, if there is no other transaction, our super resource store will pay you another 3.45 million ultra-quality spiritual stones, and this transaction is over. Han Fei nodded slightly. That's good. I wonder what is the standard of the resource store's harvest. Bai Yu said, we don't accept resources below the peak level of the Venerable Realm unless they are extremely special. Of course, other stores on the island are likely to accept them. However, in the Martial Emperor City, resources below the Venerable Realm are not circulated. Some ordinary resources are also of very low value. The valuable ones are all good. Han Fei nodded slightly. Understood, the transaction is over. Bai Yu nodded slightly. The next moment, he disappeared. Today, everyone present was stunned. Han Fei and Xia Shaochan bought almost 100 million worth of resources. What are they going to do? Are they going to be the king? Chapter 1838. This time, Han Fei had really gone all out. Although Han Fei had a lot of resources, he couldn't afford such consumption. Han Fei planned to keep many of the resources and bring them back to the Yin-Yang Heaven. However, when shopping in the Super Resource Store, Han Fei really couldn't control himself. For example, when he saw the leaves of the divine demonic vine, he knew that the leaves were made of strange divine demonic threads. Using it to refine battle suits, one could even refine sea-quelling bizarre treasures. To put it bluntly, it should not be a problem to refine 9 sets of battle suits with 9 leaves. There were 9 sets of sea-quelling bizarre treasures. Also, the grade 6 soul pills, if they were to be auctioned off, the price would probably be 5 million per pill. The reason why they were still kept in the resource store was because the resource store had a rich variety of items. It was originally going for the high-end route, so it naturally couldn't be lacking in such high-end items. Of course, among these things, the first one that Han Fei could use were the 11 tendons. Those were the tendons of the sea expansion realm. If they were used to refine the void lines, their power would be enough to shake sea expansion experts. Deal with a half-king realm cultivator. There were no more mistakes. The news that Han Fei and Xia Shaochan spent hundreds of millions of yuan on the resource store almost spread throughout the entire Martial Emperor City in a moment. After all, this move was too ruthless. Although the Martial Emperor City was known to have countless treasures, it was rare to see someone throw away hundreds of millions of treasures like Han Fei and the others. Even the captains of the top 10 pirate crews had never spent so much money before. Of course, it was mainly because these things were useless to them. Not only did he not know how to smith or forge pills, he had also bought grade 6 soul pills and the like to raise his fighting prowess. At this moment, soon after he left the resource store, he saw Li Kaitian. As soon as Li Kaitian saw Han Fei, he immediately greeted him, "Captain, I heard that you went to the island and came to the resource store. Old Song was afraid that you didn't have enough money, so he asked me to send you money." Li Kaitian immediately took out the Sun Moon shell and handed it to Han Fei. Then, he looked in the direction of the resource store and asked tentatively, "Are they done buying? By the time you gave me the money, I was already detained there." "There's 20 million here." Li Kaitian nodded. "Captain, your information is true. If we had known, we would have asked for more. It's just that we didn't expect it." "Ha!" Han Fei said angrily, "Fine. I've been to the intelligence center, and I can't go any higher. Let's go back first. The Martial Emperor's inheritance will be in 2 days. I should go back and study it." Sigh. "Captain, what did you buy? We haven't visited this resource store before. It's said that the things inside are quite expensive, easily hundreds of thousands." Hardly had Li Kaitian said that when someone exclaimed not far away, "Look, that's Han Fei, the Avenger. He just bought 100 million worth of goods from the resource store. Wow, a pirate captain level powerhouse is indeed extraordinary." Someone greeted Han Fei. "Captain Han Fei, is the Avenger still recruiting?" Han Fei said casually, "No. That person only felt that it was a pity, but he did not take it to heart." However, Li Kaitian was dumbfounded. "What do you mean by buying goods worth 100 million? Is the captain that rich?" Li Kaitian still remembered that Song Kaiyuan and the others discussed that Han Fei might have 30 million to 40 million ultra-quality spiritual stones. Logically speaking, this money should be enough. Just in case, Han Fei asked him to give him the money. In the end, he bought 100 million in one go. Was this 20 million really a lot? Han Fei said, "What are you waiting for? Lead the way." Night fell. There were no clouds or mist blocking the sky above the Martial Emperor city, and the moonlight and stars could be seen. Just when Han Fei and the others were about to arrive at the rented courtyard, suddenly, Han Fei glanced at a figure in the distance. That person had no intention of concealing himself. Instead, with a single thought, he appeared before the crowd. Li Kaitian was still dumbfounded. Who the hell is this? However, Xia Xiaochan's face changed. Han Fei looked at the evil face and the corner of the mouth with a hint of mockery. Immediately, he was in a bad mood. Even if he just spent 100 million, it was hard to make him feel better. Han Fei said indifferently, "Long time no see." "What? Are you going to attack me again in the Martial Emperor city?" The man chuckled and said, "I didn't expect that a little guy could reach such a level in such a short time. That's more than I expected." Han Fei sneered, "There are still a lot of things that are beyond your expectations. We haven't settled our grudge yet. You killed me once. Do you really think that's enough?" Chen Huangdian held his head high and smiled with his hands behind his back. "With your current strength, you're not qualified to settle the score with me. Let's talk about it after you pass the heavenly tribulation." Then, Chen Huangdian looked at Xia Xiaochan and said, "Little princess, you've squandered the resources and traveled in secret realms all these years. Is this how you repay me?" Xia Xiaochan blushed, but she still raised her head and said, "Don't think that I don't know. You have ulterior motives. You taught me and gave me resources just to wake up my mother. I'm just too weak to wake her up. Otherwise, you wouldn't have raised me." Chen Huangdian said unhurriedly, "That's really sad. It seems that women are always outgoing. You can't rely on your princess even if you have a man." As Li Kaitian listened on the side, he could feel sweat dripping down his back. He secretly swallowed his saliva. Judging from their conversation, Han Fei guessed that the man before him was Chen Huangdian of the Merman royal family. It was said that he was one of the top 10 kings in the entire chaotic ocean. Han Fei asked, "Is there anything else?" "Get out of my way. I don't have time to waste with you." Chen Huangdian's lips curled. "It's true that you talk tough in the martial emperor city. However, do you think you can stop me with some groundless intelligence?" Han Fei said, "We'll know whether or not I can stop you when the time comes. You'd better not give me a chance to grow, or I'll make you regret it." Chen Huangdian chuckled. "Let's wait and see." After that, Chen Huangdian still had his hands behind his back. He disappeared from the street after 2 steps. After Chen Huangdian left, Han Fei still looked awful. Han Fei thought to himself, "Did I underestimate Chen Huangdian? It seemed that the guidance from the intelligence wasn't enough. Don't worry. At least in the martial emperor city, he won't have a chance to do anything." Han Fei slightly nodded. "Okay. Ignore him. Let's see how we deal with him after the martial emperor's inheritance." The next day, Han Fei's deeds continued to spread in the martial emperor city. The things about the oracle and Chen Huangdian, which were pushed by certain people and turned a blind eye, were finally spread in the martial emperor city. The entire martial emperor city was shocked when the news came out. For a moment, the experts in the martial emperor city all changed their opinion about the mermaids. Before, the mermaids were powerful, but they weren't powerful enough to dominate the chaotic ocean. However, after the news spread, the image of the mermaids changed in everyone's mind. Song Kaiyuan and the others went shopping early in the morning to get some intelligence about the martial emperor's inheritance. Han Fei, on the other hand, didn't go out again. At this moment, Han Fei sensed the arrival of his clone, which meant that Shui Zhan was here. However, it was understandable. The inheritance of the invincible realm was such a big event that all the heavenly talents of the 36 immortal palaces must have come. If Shui Zhan didn't come, he would attract attention. However, this time, Han Fei had to find a way to take back Shui Zhan's clone. After all, without a clone, Han Fei's strength was not at its peak. Early the next morning, during the day in Forge the Universe, Han Fei refined all the tendons of the Azure Dragon Big Tendon level. This was the only way for Han Fei to quickly improve his strength at present. As for other resources, he had to wait until he had enough time to complete them one by one. Today was the day when the inheritance of the invincible realm was opened. Song Kaiyuan and the others had already quietly returned to their camp. And Han Fei, relying on the intelligence, went straight to the mountains in the South City. Amidst the lush green mountains, there was a valley that looked like a plain. On the plain here, there was a black mist. When Han Fei saw the black mist, his pupils constricted slightly. Huh? Why does it look so much like the star sea mist in the 1,000-star proving ground? At this moment, there were more than 23,000 people standing in the square, ranging from beginner venerables to half-king venerables. Among these people, the number of beginner and intermediate venerables was very small, but the majority were advanced venerables and peak-level venerables. Even so, there were more than 23,000 venerables here. This number made Han Fei realize that there was no shortage of venerables in this world. The total number of venerables in the entire chaotic ocean was probably several times this number. When Han Fei and Xia Shaochan arrived, they immediately attracted the attention of countless people. Among them, many people couldn't help but look gloomy when they saw Han Fei. For example, the Golden Crow Heaven, the Medicine King Heaven, the Dream Weaving Heaven, the God Refining Heaven, the Wuji Heaven, the Azura Pirates, the Red Fire Pirates, the Raiders Pirates, the Gale Pirates. These were all people who directly offended Han Fei. Too many of the 36 immortal palaces had been robbed by Han Fei. In the land of King Death, almost every family had been robbed by him. On the Snow God's temple's side, Bingxue Chu Ling looked at Han Fei, who had appeared openly. After hearing about what Han Fei had done in the past 2 days, the fact that he had spent hundreds of millions of venerables had touched the hearts of countless pirates. They couldn't wait to rob Han Fei. On the witch pirate's side, Long Wu, Pearl, and a group of venerables who had been with Han Fei before looked extremely complicated at this moment. At the beginning, how could they have thought that this guy was so terrifying? The Avenger dared to provoke everywhere and even dared to attack the Wuji fleet alone? He was simply a lunatic. And Han Fei ignored these people's gazes, stared at the black mist in front of him, and said lightly, "So, this is it?" Chapter 1839. The main reason why everyone treated Han Fei and Xia Shaochan differently was that they all knew who they were. One of them was the captain of the Avengers, who was said to be at the Pioneer Sea realm and had fought many kings. Except for Bei Xianbing, he had never been defeated by anyone else. The other was the princess of the mermaid royal family, who was too noble. She lived a luxurious life in the royal family. Strength aside, whoever dared to touch this person would be hunted down by the entire merfolk royal family. At this moment, more than 20,000 people had gathered here just to take part in the trial of the invincible inheritance. According to the information Song Kaiyuan received, the martial emperor's inheritance was just a test and didn't involve the participants killing each other. It was said that the martial emperor's inheritance had 4 tests: luck, challenge, perception, and life and death. However, the information didn't say what the specific process was. At this moment, when everyone saw a black fog barrier appearing in broad daylight, they could roughly guess that the trial should be carried out in this fog. Swish, swish, swish. When everyone gathered, they saw 8 Pioneer Sea Realm experts appear in the air. Among them, Han Fei found that he knew 2 of them. They were Yen Meng from the Intelligence Center and Bai Yu from the Super Resource Store. Han Fei didn't know where the other 6 people were from. However, he guessed that they should be local Pioneer Sea Realm experts of the Martial Emperor City. Han Fei didn't believe that there were only 8 kings in the Martial Emperor City. However, the Martial Emperor City was only so big. They could easily search the whole city. Why did they send all the kings here? It was enough for these people to maintain order and explain the rules. Among the 8 people, there was a rather elegant young man in a light blue robe, holding a paper fan in his hand. He had the temperament of a cultured man. Xia Shaochan nodded. "I know this man. He's Zhang Luotian from the Martial Emperor City. His weapon is the Heavenly Feather Fan. It's said that his strength is in the top 10 of the Pioneer Sea Realm in the entire Chaotic Ocean." Han Fei's heart did a flip. Top 10. This man must be very powerful. Han Fei couldn't help but ask, "Can Bei Xianbing enter the top 10? Xia Shaochan shook her head. "No." Han Fei immediately understood. If that was the case, then the weight of the top 10 was extremely high. Although his battle with Bei Xianbing had only been the black mist body of the Gemini divine art, and his power hadn't been at its peak, it still wasn't something an ordinary sea expansion expert could defeat in one blow. Of course, Han Fei didn't know how powerful the top 10 were. However, if North Xianbing measured it, he wouldn't be able to reach that level even after he became a king. In the end, he had been in the sea expansion realm for tens of thousands of years. It was impossible for someone who had just broken through to surpass him. Otherwise, what was the point of the sea expansion realm? Zhang Luotian said, "Everyone, welcome to our Martial Emperor City's Millennium Grand Meeting. The Martial Emperor's inheritance is the only inheritance since the establishment of our Martial Emperor City. Up until now, no one had been able to complete the inheritance trial with 100% success. The rules were the same as before, with a total of 4 rounds of testing. The person with the best results in the trial can propose 3 conditions to the Martial Emperor City that are within our capabilities. If the result of the trial reaches 95%, you can accept the real Martial Emperor's inheritance. Now, the trial will begin in the time it takes for an incense stick to burn." Han Fei didn't know much about the trial, but with so many people here, he didn't need to panic. After all, he couldn't be worse than most people. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the trial officially began. Zhang Luotian and the others closed the way and nodded slightly. The first round of the trial is a competition of luck. Later, you will enter the black mist. Anyone who can get a golden bead from the black mist will be qualified to take the next round of the trial. Remember, the golden bead can't be snatched, so don't fight for it. In the black mist, everyone will be covered by a layer of mist. Therefore, you won't recognize each other, and you can't attack anyone else. The whole trial will last for 1 day. After you get the golden bead, you will be expelled from the black mist. When the black mist disappears, those who haven't got the golden bead will be eliminated. As soon as Zhang Luotian finished speaking, the black mist spread automatically. The 8C expansion monarchs shouted at the same time, the trial begins. Swish, swish, swish. More than 20,000 people, like moths darting into the fire, rushed to the depths of the black mist. Of course, there were some who were relatively calm, such as Han Fei and Xia Shaochan, who just walked casually into the depths of the black mist. Han Fei said, if the result can be determined soon, it won't take a day. Han Fei thought to himself, I've never lost the battle of providence. When I was in the Yin-Yang heaven and the Waterwood heaven, my luck was very good. Those who knew me all know that I have good luck. However, what made Han Fei slightly distressed was that his clone, Shuizhan, would probably gain nothing. After all, he and Shuizhan were the same person. Theoretically speaking, he would only get 1 golden bead. Before Han Fei entered the depths of the black mist, he saw someone in front of him looking at him. He took a closer look. Wasn't that Li Xinghan? Li Xinghan said indifferently, I'm very curious. How much energy does your secret technique consume? However, you can't just rely on secret techniques to become stronger. I'll wait for you in the 4th round of the trial. With that, Li Xinghan walked into the depths of the mist. Not far away, there was another person watching Han Fei. The man's face was quite gloomy and his hair was tied up in a braid. Obviously, he was trendy. The man said, You're Han Fei, right? I'm Deputy Leader Wu of the Grand Purity Palace. We're on the same path. Please give me some advice in the future. Han Fei glanced at him and rolled his eyes. I hope you die soon. If you die, I won't have any opponents. With that, Han Fei and Xia Shaochan swaggered into the depths of the black mist. Deputy Leader Wu smiled, not minding it at all. His eyes lit up, and he thought to himself, the master of the Yin-Yang heaven? Him. Taking 100 steps forward, Han Fei felt as if he were in a sea of stars. At this time, Han Fei quickly looked to the side, only to find that Xia Shaochan had disappeared at some point. In Han Fei's field of vision, Han Fei could clearly see that quite a few people nearby were also slightly confused. When he looked up again, he saw a meteor streaking across the sky. Before Han Fei moved, he saw several people around him rush towards the meteor with a swish. Han Fei shook his head speechlessly. Didn't they say that it depended on luck? It was useless to rob them. Therefore, Han Fei didn't intend to do such a meaningless thing. When he was outside, Zhang Luotian said that the martial emperor's inheritance had a completion rate. Han Fei couldn't help thinking, what completion rate is there to get the golden beads by luck? In the sea of stars in the sky, one after another, stars fell from the sky. However, none of them aroused Han Fei's interest. In the outside world. Swish, swish, swish. One trial taker after another reappeared in the wilderness outside. These people were all holding a dazzling golden bead in their hands. If Han Fei were here, he would definitely find that this thing was clearly a star bead from the 1,000-star proving ground of the Yin-Yang heaven. In the galaxy, Han Fei looked up. This was because he saw a shooting star flying towards him. Han Fei's heart did a flip. Just now, Zhang Luotian said that once he got the golden bead, he would appear in the outside world. However, at this moment, Han Fei hadn't figured it out yet, so he didn't raise his hand. When the golden light smashed towards him, Han Fei slightly leaned his body and quickly scanned the thing with his perception. At that moment, Han Fei finally saw it clearly. This was clearly a star bead. He had taken so many star beads that he couldn't be wrong. The one just now was a 7-star bead. Han Fei frowned slightly. Why is there a star bead here? Could it be that the 1,000-star proving ground of the Yin-Yang heaven was actually an imitation of the Invincible Realm's inheritance? However, after missing the 7-star bead, Han Fei didn't feel sorry at all. It was just a 7-star bead. In the yin-yang heaven, he wouldn't even bother to pick it up if it fell to the ground. 3 hours later. As many as 20-star beads flew past Han Fei one after another. Han Fei didn't take any of them, because there wasn't even a 9-star bead among them. The highest was only 8-star. Can I only wait for luck? Han Fei was puzzled. At this moment, Han Fei's Tao changed, and Han Fei created something out of nothing. He said, "In this world, all the luck is with me." Han Fei was just testing it with common sense. He just wanted to try it out. As a result, swish, swish, swish above the sky, tens of millions of golden meteors smashed towards where Han Fei was. Fuck. Han Fei was dumbfounded and said in surprise, "A meteor shower?" In addition to Han Fei, countless people in the firmament sea of stars looked up. Someone was surprised. There are so many golden beads. How can you not get one? Someone was shocked. Is this a grand event triggered by someone? Someone was shocked. Oh, do I have great luck and trigger a rain of golden beads? Many people rushed towards Han Fei. Most people just thought that this was a natural phenomenon, and those who saw it should have a share of it. However, a few people looked horrified and murmured, "There is a person with great luck here. Star-attracting beads are raining. Who could it be?" And Han Fei, the protagonist of this incident, when faced with such a storm of star beads, his body was moving in an extremely weak posture. Han Fei spread out his soul and scanned this place with the method of nuance. Swish. 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 When the densely packed star beads swept past him, Han Fei didn't even make a move for dozens of seconds. The others who had just arrived were dumbfounded and filled with disbelief upon seeing this. Wow! Such a magnificent spectacle is being triggered by one person. Someone made up his mind and stepped forward to snatch it. However, in a moment of carelessness, a fiery light was shattered. His body and divine soul were instantly pierced through. Many people who were about to make a move were too scared to move when they saw this scene. Just when more and more people were watching, suddenly, Han Fei reached out to the void and encountered the first 9-star bead. However, just when Han Fei was about to touch the 9-star pearl, suddenly, Han Fei secretly pinched his fingers with his other hand. His eyes immediately swept to the sky. There was a resplendent star bead there, and a gentle starlight quietly appeared. Han Fei immediately withdrew his hand, reached out to the void, and pinched a bead that was not golden but shining with white light. First update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1840. The moment Han Fei held the bead in his hand, he saw golden light pouring into it. The white bead's color changed. Not only did it turn gold, but it also had a 10-star symbol on it. This was the first time that Han Fei had seen a 10-star mark. Even though he had obtained all the star beads in the yin-yang heaven, he had never seen a 10-star star bead. Besides, when Han Fei took this star bead, a voice seemed to appear in his head, "Trial of Providence, 100% completion rate." Swish! Before Han Fei could be surprised, the space in front of him disappeared without a trace. Han Fei's eyes suddenly lit up. It was the valley and the wilderness where he came from. After coming out, Han Fei looked down and found that the star mark on the star bead in his hand had disappeared. It seemed to have been hidden. Although Han Fei was surprised that he got a 100% completion rate, he still looked around for Xia Xiaochan. Seeing that she hadn't come out yet, Han Fei glanced at the others. Han Fei saw Song Kaiyuan, Jian Hui, and Song Hongyu from the dragon-taming heaven, but he didn't see any other acquaintances. At this time, people appeared in this open space from time to time. Half an hour later, he saw Xia Xiaochan appear in the open space with a swish. As soon as Xia Xiaochan came out, she looked around and found Han Fei. Immediately, Xia Xiaochan trotted to Han Fei. 9 stars. Is this the highest or the lowest? Noticing that there were 8 half-kings here, Han Fei said with a smile, "I'm also a 9-star. Even if I'm not the highest, I don't think anyone among these people is higher than a 9-star. What was the role of the martial emperor city? Han Fei wasn't sure. In short, the completion rate was not set by these people. It seemed that it was determined by another kind of power. Therefore, all he needed to do was to continue the trial. There was no need to say it now. While Han Fei and Xia Shaochan were talking about how he only got a 9-star bead, Zhang Luotian and the other kings in the Pioneer Sea realm were also secretly discussing. Zhang Luotian said, 9 stars of providence. No wonder she's the princess of the mermaid royal family. Han Fei is also quite good. Unfortunately, he's still a little short of perfection. Yan Meng said, 10 stars only exist in legends. We've never seen one. In this battle for providence, the top prodigies should all be 9-star prodigies. I wonder, how many 9-star cultivators will there be this time? Bai Yu, this is only the first round of training, there are many who have come later, let's wait and see. Suddenly, someone asked, then what are Han Fei and Xia Shaochan doing? Everyone saw that Han Fei and Xia Shaochan took out a big pot. The pot was filled with the flesh of a king and was currently being cooked. All the kings were speechless. You're eating here on such a serious occasion. Was this really appropriate? However, Song Kaiyuan and the others who had eaten Han Fei's hot pot couldn't help but turn green when they saw Han Fei take out the big pot. How can a captain be so arrogant? How can you eat under such circumstances? Half a day later, slurp. Han Fei took a bite of lobster meat. At this time, there were already quite a few people coming out. Many venerables looked at Han Fei and Xia Shaochan, who were eating, dumbfounded. Someone was speechless. They're doing this on purpose to disturb our thoughts. Someone exclaimed, they're cooking the flesh of the kings. These two people are too extravagant. Most people had to calm down and close their sense of smell when they smelled the rich fragrance, so as not to disturb their state of mind. During this period, Han Fei was also surprised. For some reason, his clone, Shuezhan, also came out. This meant that Shuezhan also got a star bead. Xue Bingxue was also very confused. She looked at Han Fei and then at Shuezhan, thinking, isn't this golden bead supposed to be a test of providence? How could one person get 2 test results? One day later. In this field, a total of more than 17,000 people came out of the black mist. In other words, in the first round, which was theoretically the simplest test, more than 6,000 people were eliminated. This was just the first round. Zhang Luotian raised his hand, and the black mist slowly disappeared. In another open space, the remaining more than 6,000 people appeared uniformly. Most of these people didn't look very good. Those who could come to Martial Emperor City to participate in the Martial Emperor's inheritance trial were at least carefully selected. Many people felt that they still had a lot of potential, but they just had to be eliminated. Among the 8 kings, someone shouted, those who are eliminated, leave the field within 100 seconds. After the eliminated people were eliminated, in front of the crowd, not far away, 4 gates appeared in a row in the form of void vortexes. These gates were still colorful. When the vortexes rotated, they caused strange ripples of light, which looked white, blue, red, and dark red. Zhang Luotian nodded slightly to the other kings and then said, in the next trial, most of you will be eliminated. However, it doesn't matter. Once you feel that you are in a life-and-death crisis, remember to crush the golden bead in your hand. Otherwise, you may really die in it. Everyone couldn't help but look at the golden bead in their hands. At this moment, the golden bead had merged with his divine will. As long as he willed it, it would appear in his hand in its entirety. What made them look serious was that there was a chance of dying in the second trial. But with the golden bead, it shouldn't be a big problem. But some people still didn't understand the 4 gates. Someone said, Lord King, which gate should we enter? This time, it was Yan Meng's turn to speak. She said, you need to ask the golden bead in your hand which gate you should enter. Take out the golden bead first, and go to the gate that you feel is the most attractive to you. The crowd hurried to give it a try. Someone immediately got feedback. I am the first white gate. The calling is very strong. I am the first gate too. I am the second gate. I only took a 4-star golden bead. I thought it would be very low. I think it should be better than the first gate. Yes. I am the second gate too. You all are. Just when most people were summoned by the first and second gates, someone suddenly said, "Look, Nangong Yu from the dream sky is walking to the third gate." Oh, Li Xuanfeng from the wind slasher sky is also the third gate. What? The Taixian heavenly sword is actually the fourth gate. At this time, in the eyes of the trial takers, the difference of one gate represented the difference in talent, luck, and quality of the star bead. Xia Shaochan looked at Han Fei and said, "I can sense the third gate and the fourth gate, but the third gate has the strongest reaction." Han Fei held the star bead and only felt the call from the fourth gate. He didn't sense the third gate at all. However, the two of them saw Li Xinghen, Wu Duoshou, Jian Hui, Song Kaiyuan, Li Xuanfeng, Wu Hao, and Sung Long all went to the fourth gate. Han Fei couldn't help but say, "Your talent and bloodline are much stronger than theirs. So, they should also have a strong reaction to the third gate." However, because they sensed the fourth gate at the same time, they chose the fourth gate. If I'm right, this second gate is also used to kill people. If there's really danger, crush the star bead. Don't hesitate. Xia Shaochan nodded. Then let's go. I also choose the fourth gate. Han Fei nodded slightly, but his eyes kept inadvertently glancing at the fourth gate. Han Fei always felt that he was a person who got the 10-star bead. Didn't he get any special treatment? How could he show his difference with the 9-star bead? Unfortunately, there were only 4 gates, and Han Fei had no choice but to enter the fourth gate. Except for the 36 mysterious heavens, the situation of the mermaids, the 100 demons, and the seabed human race was roughly the same as that of the human race. Those who could enter the fourth gate were few and far between. In the chaotic ocean, there were a total of 167 people who entered the fourth gate. This number was simply too small in the huge base of 23,000 trial takers, not even 1%. Among the heavenly talents, they were also 1 in 100. The last time Han Fei and Xia Shaochan entered the black mist, they were in separate states. This time, the two deliberately went in hand. However, when Han Fei appeared in the world in this gate, he was still separated from Xia Shaochan. However, Han Fei didn't care very much. If Xia Shaochan's strength really broke out, few people could resist her. Han Fei looked around and found that there was a calm lake in front of him. The full moon in the sky was only a few crescents, and under his feet was the boundless water without even a ripple. Only when he stepped on it would there be a few ripples. Han Fei wanted to release his perception, but he immediately found that his perception only had a range of 1,000 kilometers. Wait, Han Fei froze for a moment and immediately found that something was wrong. It was not that his perception only had a range of 1,000 kilometers, but that this world only had a range of 1,000 kilometers. In the middle of the water, Han Fei saw a young man. The young man was sitting cross-legged on the water like a statue. Looking at his face, this person was very ordinary, with a square face and a fairly burly figure. At this moment, he was too quiet, as if in an epiphany. However, when Han Fei came here, the young man suddenly opened his eyes. "You're here. Beat me and you'll pass this level. But I won't show any mercy." Second. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1841. From the looks of it, it seemed that this trial was undoubtedly going to be a battle. Han Fei guessed that since he had encountered such a battle, other people must have encountered it too. However, had he ever been afraid of anyone in the Half-King realm? None of them. The aura of the Half-King realm from the young man in front of him couldn't be deceived. Han Fei wondered who this person was. Was he a top heavenly talent cultivated by the martial emperor's city? However, he didn't think so. If all the heavenly talents in the martial emperor city were at this level, wouldn't there be more than 17,000 opponents among the 17,000 people? So, where was he now? Two kitchen knives appeared in Han Fei's hands. Even if he didn't use the power of the Great Path, he had already reached the limit of the Half-King realm. It was almost comparable to the Sea Expansion realm. There was only one opponent. Why did he have to go all out? Swish. Although he didn't intend to use the power of the Great Path, Han Fei didn't underestimate his opponent. The first move was the Yin-Yang Reincarnation Knife. The two knives slashed out, and Han Fei's figure instantly soared to the extreme. Like a streak of stars, he waved the knives with both hands, and two sky-reaching knife lights directly tore the calm lake surface for thousands of kilometers. In this scene, a terrifying knife light tens of thousands of meters high slid across the water. Because the speed was so fast, it seemed to form two air walls. Han Fei thought that less than 10 people in the same realm as him could take such an attack head-on. However, the young man on the opposite side suddenly grinned, revealing a sneer. Pop! A golden ripple formed in the shape of a ripple and blocked in front of him. His aura soared and soared into the sky. Void God Barrier. Clang! 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 Both the Yin-Yang Reincarnation Knife and the two draw techniques exploded at the same time. After the young man blocked Han Fei's attack, a condensed void barrier rose in front of him. Around him, the blow just now caused the ochre-red murderous intent to fluctuate, sweeping the entire lake surface. At this time, the young man's power had completely burst out. The clothes on his arms exploded, the red silk around his neck flew, the surrounding lake water swirled, and the void was still. Han Fei's attack had completely disappeared. He said, "I'm still not strong enough. There's no limit to my strength. I can still become stronger." Roar! Han Fei was shocked and felt that something was wrong. Although this man said that he wouldn't hold back, he didn't seem to care. However, the current situation felt more like they were challenging him. He wanted to become stronger, and his obsession had reached the point of madness. Swish! Suddenly, the young man's figure disappeared. Han Fei was shocked. So fast. Han Fei's eyesight was already extremely fast. He saw a figure coming at him. However, the opponent's speed was too fast, and his hands were unable to counterattack in time. Before his hands could react, Han Fei's soul did. The mystic armor array suddenly appeared. This was the fastest method Han Fei could set up. Crack, boom. Han Fei felt as if he had been blown away by a king's blow. That feeling was like the attack of the everlasting sky cloud sky crane, not the attack of the profound ice. In short, it felt like he had been defeated in an instant. Fuse. In the process of flying backward, Han Fei had no time to care about how many bones he had broken and directly chose to fuse with Little Black and Little White. As soon as the fusion was completed and the Yin-Yang divine eyes had just appeared, he saw a fist mark coming down from above. Shoot! At that moment, Han Fei's body shone with golden light, and the invincible will formed a giant shield in front of him. Crack! Bam! It was exactly the same scene. Han Fei was flying much faster than lightning at this moment. In an instant, the fist mark above blasted the water surface, causing waves of thousands of meters on the surface of the lake. Puff! A mouthful of golden blood spurted out. Han Fei was horrified. Son of a bitch, I underestimated the enemy. Han Fei didn't expect that there was such a strong master in the Half-King realm. As the saying went, when strong masters fought, one careless move and the whole game would be lost. He was suppressed by the opponent, which led to the current situation where he couldn't react. Huh! At this moment, the 100-beast soul-devouring roar burst out. The man's fist mark arrived again. It was about to hit him, but it paused for a moment. This time was extremely short, so short that it was almost negligible. Swish, swish! All of a sudden, dozens of projections appeared, and Han Fei took this opportunity to retreat. The power of the Great Path ran, and his combat power soared. As for those projections, they were all destroyed in an instant. So strong. Han Fei knew that he had met the strongest opponent in his life. Even when fighting against a sea-opening realm master, he had never felt so powerless. However, today, this state was forced out by an enemy in the same realm. Han Fei had never been so nervous. At the moment when he blocked the opponent with the power of projections, he moved his body out and hurriedly ran the great path. His combat power soared crazily, and the Heavenly Awakening Divine Technique fell. However, the Heavenly Awakening Divine Technique also took time. At this time, the yin-yang reincarnation knife that had just burst out appeared again. Han Fei took this opportunity to directly crush two ultra-quality divine weapons and continued to attack with the yin-yang reincarnation knife. Even in this situation, the young man still tried to appear in front of him in an instant, facing the yin-yang reincarnation knife with both fists at the same time. Although Han Fei's strength hadn't risen to its peak, how could he admit defeat now? He also made a seal with both fists, and the invincible fist mark blasted at the opponent's fist mark. Rumble, the surface of the lake exploded in an instant, and waves splashed all over the sky. Han Fei was sent flying hundreds of miles away by the opponent's fists, while the young man only retreated more than 10 meters. Kacha! Judging from the sound, Han Fei's 10 fingers were broken by the punch. Han Fei's face was extremely gloomy. It was the first time that he had been so embarrassed. He was caught and hit hard for the first time. If he were an ordinary person, he would have been beaten to the ground. However, who was Han Fei? He had the indestructible golden body, and his strength was comparable to that of a king. A Heavenly Awakening Divine Technique fell, but it failed to illuminate Han Fei. Because just when Han Fei was about to be illuminated, he was blasted away by the opposite guy. However, with the operation of the Great Tao, Han Fei's strength became stronger again. Han Fei roared, "Come on!" This time, that person did not chase after him. Instead, he stood still. He said, "The power of the Great Tao is quite powerful. It seems that there is finally someone who can make me challenge my limits." Han Fei's eyelids twitched when he heard this. While the man didn't attack, the Heavenly Awakening Divine Technique fell on his body, and the bones in his body were cracking. His 10 fingers, hand bones, ribs, and the separated soul and power were all returning. Han Fei said, "Brother, before we fight, can I ask you, who are you?" "Who am I?" "You can call me Martial Emperor." Han Fei. Han Fei was speechless. "Fuck, even if you're joking. Is this the level of a martial emperor? Who are you kidding?" However, the man immediately returned to the battle. He said, "Let the battle begin." And Han Fei, after only one Heavenly Awakening Divine Technique, immediately changed the Great Tao to the Road of Invincibility and the Great Tao of Time. Together with the Great Tao of Body, this should be his strongest configuration at present. With a thought, the spiritual energy around Han Fei turned into a time barrier. Han Fei drew out a knife, held the time barrier in his hand, and instantly fought with the man. However, when the two of them fought, Han Fei found that this person's speed was too fast and his battle power was too strong. Even with the help of Han Fei's Taoism and the super combat power of the Pioneer Sea realm, the man could still catch up with him. When Han Fei used a knife, he found that using a weapon seemed to affect his speed. Even if he used time acceleration, it required a high degree of control over the power of time. He had to divert his attention to control the flow of time while fighting against such a powerhouse. After a few seconds, although he didn't lose, he didn't have the slightest advantage. Immediately, Han Fei gave up the intention of using the Blade of Time to attack the opponent. Instead, he simply used the time technique to accelerate his battle speed and slow down the opponent's attack frequency. Even so, there were only bang 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 bang. In just a few seconds, the two might have fought tens of thousands of times. The spiritual energy and energy in Han Fei's body had been emptied as early as the second. But fortunately, Han Fei had a reserve of spiritual energy, and his energy absorption speed was extremely fast. After about 5 seconds in a row, Han Fei felt that there was no part of his body that didn't hurt. Seeing this situation, Han Fei didn't dare to be distracted. The 2 wisps of chaotic energy immediately spread in his body, and his power increased again. However, seeing that Han Fei had used the chaotic energy, the young man didn't hold back at all and seemed to explode the chaotic energy crazily. The 2 fists collided, and the surface of the lake exploded in an instant, and the 2 of them hit the barrier. And the power of the 2 wisps of chaotic energy in Han Fei's body was used up in an instant. Because of the use of the chaotic energy, above the water, within 1,000 kilometers, violent energy swept across the world. To put it bluntly, if a venerable below the peak level of the venerable dared to be placed in this environment, the probability of dying was almost 100%. When the invincible golden body was used to the extreme, the degree of spiritual energy disassembly was comprehended to 100%, and the Tao was condensed in an instant. He still couldn't win this battle. Han Fei's heart sank. The strength of the person opposite him seemed to be improving all the time. The more powerful she became, the more powerful he became. Why should he do that? The 3rd time. Please vote. End of this chapter. Chapter 1842. Bam! 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 The battle between Han Fei and the martial emperor had lasted for nearly 10 minutes. Now, Han Fei had reached the limit of his combat power. A blue halo appeared, time flowed, and Han Fei's strength returned to the peak. Of course, Han Fei spent 20 wisps of chaotic gas. In such a high-intensity battle, even if Han Fei didn't want to waste this power, he had to. If his strength was not at the peak, he would lose in a single blow. Fuck, is the martial emperor's inheritance so difficult? When he came in this time, Zhang Luotian and the others didn't say how long the second trial would last. Han Fei didn't think it would only be 20 minutes, right? But if they were all opponents of this level, Han Fei couldn't help but wonder who could persist to the end. If even he couldn't. He really couldn't imagine how many people could. However, Han Fei didn't know that just 5 seconds after he went in, dozens or even hundreds of people appeared on the field outside almost at the same time. By the 5th breath, the number of people who had appeared in the wilderness outside had reached close to 5,000. At this moment, everyone's faces were filled with lingering fear. Someone was shocked. So strong, too strong. I didn't even see that person. I only felt that the breath of death had been enveloping me. Too strong. I only took one punch and my body almost collapsed. That person was invincible. By the way, did you see who that person was? I just saw a black shadow. Someone was speechless. What are you looking at? He crushed me in every aspect. Except for passive resistance, I couldn't even find a chance to attack. Zhang Luotian and the others stood in the sky as if they had expected this. Someone said, "Why don't we make a bet on how long the longest one can last?" I bet 20 minutes. Baiyu said grumpily, "Ling Yuan, do you think you're so great just because you opened a casino? Do you know how to gamble? This martial emperor's inheritance is a big deal. You'd better stay put." The man called Ling Yuan shrugged and said, "I didn't say anything wrong. This level is too difficult. In the past tens of thousands of years, no one has ever lasted more than 100 breaths against a miniature martial emperor." Zhang Luotian said unhurriedly, "The martial king once set a battle record of 82 breaths. This time, it could be considered as a group of heroes rising together." Here, there were 3 experts from the Invincible Road. The Mermaid Royal Family, the 100 Demon Clan, and the Human Clan at the bottom of the sea had all sent their top talents. There should be some who can hold on for less than 50 breaths of time. There should be some who can hold on for 30 breaths. 30 breaths? Ling Yuan curled his lips and said, "In any case, I only lasted for 24 breaths of time back then. It's too difficult. I can't beat it." Yen Meng, those who can last for 20 breaths have a high chance of becoming a king. Let's wait and see. Meanwhile, battles were raging in the world behind the door. When the self-proclaimed martial emperor saw Han Fei use the time art, he couldn't help but say, "The time great Tao." He was just stalling for time. How can a battle between experts be dragged out to determine victory or defeat? Roar! At that moment, the martial emperor seemed to have exploded. A big Xiantian bird was hanging in the air. In Han Fei's eyes, the wings of the big bird were shining with golden light. When its feathers moved away, Han Fei actually saw a human face on the bird's head. Shoot! A human-faced bird with a golden-winged bird? Han Fei couldn't help but swallow. If it was what he understood. It was said that this bird ate dragons, and it could eat 500 dragons a day. Was this a spiritual beast, a joke? Hiss! At this moment, Han Fei regretted leaving the Emperor Sparrow in the Yin-Yang heaven. However, Little Black and Little White hadn't become venerables yet. Even if they fused, they might not be able to defeat this martial emperor. However, to Han Fei's surprise, there was no information about the golden-winged bird in his eyes. In this case, it meant that the battle he was currently experiencing was probably fake. Swish, swish, swish. While Han Fei was guessing, the martial emperor didn't stop. The golden-winged bird was fast, so at this moment, the martial emperor's speed suddenly soared a lot. Bam, 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 Han Fei and the martial emperor completely turned into infinite afterimages. It was normal for them to launch 1,000 attacks in an instant. Han Fei was horrified. No, I can't keep up. My body's reaction speed can't keep up. The limit of the law of time was broken by this person. So strong, bam. 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 In an instant, Han Fei was bombarded hundreds of times, and muffled sounds came from his body. Han Fei was seized by the martial emperor, and he was about to launch a series of tens of thousands of attacks. Han Fei's eyes were filled with fury. The power of the ancient desolate war body broke out. From the beginning, Han Fei had been cultivating a breath of fighting intent. At this moment, although this breath of fighting intent hadn't been fully cultivated, Han Fei couldn't care less. If he didn't use it now, he would lose. To the bystanders, this was a test. But for him, this was a test from the Void Temple. If he couldn't pass the test, he would miss the opportunity to join the Void Temple. Therefore, no matter how much he had to pay, he had to win this battle. Han Fei didn't know that people were guessing how long he could last. When the power of fighting intent burst out, Han Fei's heart did a flip. Clone, come here. On the other side, the snow battle body that was about to collapse suddenly disappeared without a trace. Almost at the same time, the power of the clone returned. At this moment, Han Fei's strength reached the peak state. With a thought, Han Fei's clone returned. At this moment, together with his original body that had almost been unable to make any progress, Han Fei had reached his strongest state. A string of information flashed in his eyes. Owner Han Fei, level greater than 89, Half King, C 10,000 Family Tree, 2720986, Chaotic Gas greater than 2,276 Wisps, Spiritual Power greater than 323,446, Perception Range greater than 220,000 kilometers, Strength greater than 39,999 Waves. First Spiritual Heritage Unknown, Second Spiritual Heritage Unknown, First Spiritual Beast, Twin Yin-Yang Spirit Swallowing Fish, Level 79, Second Spiritual Beast King Sparrow, Level 78, Main Art Void Arrival, Level 7 of Void Fishing, King Level, Divine Quality. Although there was still a lot of room for growth in his soul power, Han Fei had reached the limit in terms of strength. This was a shackle that was already difficult to break. However, at this moment, Han Fei activated the power of the Great Way, activated the ancient desolate war body, activated the invincible realm, and assisted by the art of time. Even if he encountered Bei Xianbing again, Han Fei would still dare to fight her. Let's fight. Bam. 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 Maybe it was because Han Fei had a more thorough understanding of the power of the Great Way, but when the two of them fought again, Han Fei could actually keep up with the martial emperor's speed. The martial emperor roared, "Fight! I am the strongest." Han Fei bared his teeth. "With me here, who do you think you are?" The martial emperor scoffed. "I told you that the art of time is just to buy time. In the outside world." At this moment, 2 minutes had passed. However, Zhang Luotian and the others became solemn. Yan Meng said, "There are 302 people who haven't come out yet. Most of them should have died. Among them, there should be less than 10 people who are very likely to really last more than 2 minutes. Among them, there should be Yu Lai and Xia Shaochan from the Mermaid Clan, Bai Lilua from the 100 Demons Clan, Mu Qingxue from the Seabed Human Clan, Yi Fan, Zhang Heng, and Zheng Shuang from the Martial Emperor City, Wu Taitu, Li Xinghan, and Han Fei from the 36 Black Heavens. Shui Zhan should have died." They couldn't help but look at Yan Meng. "How could you not know who Shui Zhan was?" Yan Meng replied, and they nodded slightly to show that they understood. Just 2 minutes later, Bai Lilua and Mu Qingxue appeared almost at the same time. Suddenly, there was an uproar in the crowd. Almost all the people had come out. There were very few who could persist until now. Not even half a breath's time after these 2 people appeared, 2 more people appeared. Most people didn't know these 2 people. However, the people of the Martial Emperor City knew these 2 people. They were the top heavenly talents of the Martial Emperor City, Zhang Heng and Zheng Shuang. Another 4 breaths later, 2 figures appeared with a whoosh. Taking a closer look, it was Li Xinghan and a guy that no one was familiar with. Someone wondered. Li Xinghan came out and persisted for a full 3 minutes. "This time, I'm afraid he will enter the top 5. But who is the person next to him?" Someone said, "It's normal that you don't know that person. This person is a local heavenly talent of the Martial Emperor City. His name is Yi Fan, and he is one of the few famous disciples of the Martial Emperor City. It's a pity that even a local heavenly talent of the Martial Emperor City can't win first place." Someone sighed. "Rival Wu hasn't appeared yet." Someone suddenly said, that Han Fei hasn't appeared either. While the crowd was discussing, 3 minutes later, with a swish, a person appeared on the field with a man's chi and blood soaring into the sky. "It's him, Rival Wu of the Grand Purity Palace. 38 minutes. I can't even hold on for 3 minutes. How did he persist for 3 minutes?" In the crowd, 2 people scoffed. Who else could it be but Bai Muling and Sita Yuhong? Bai Muling said, "Our mermaid clans Yu Lai and Princess Xia Shaochan haven't come out yet." Sita Yuhong said, "With the princess's strength, it's more than enough for her to persist for 50 minutes. How can this Rival Wu compare to her?" As soon as the 2 said that, a colorful light appeared. It was a male mermaid. Instantly, Bai Muling and Sita Yuhong heaved sighs of relief. The boasting that he had just made was about to explode. Even the 8 kings looked solemn at this moment. Everyone couldn't help but look at Zhang Luotian and said in shock, "Old Zhang, how long did you last?" 3 minutes, right?" Zhang Luotian also looked solemn. "This time, the strength of the trial takers is completely beyond our expectations. What's more surprising is that someone can actually hold on until now." Second. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1843. No matter how shocked the outside world was, at this moment, there were still people fighting in the door world. Cicada, at this moment, Xia Shaochan burst out her strongest strength. In the state of the heavenly cicada transformation, it was impossible to see Xia Shaochan with the naked eye of the same realm. Because of the ability of the shadow shrimp, Xia Shaochan could turn into a shadow and even control the shadow of the martial emperor. However, this kind of combat method had been broken by the martial emperor in the 28th minute. No matter how Xia Shaochan turned into a shadow, it couldn't be separated from the use of soul power. The martial emperor's combat power was strong, and his soul was also extremely powerful. He turned the power of his soul into a soul body and fought with the shadow. Originally, this kind of battle would be over in less than 10 minutes. However, Xia Shaochan still had the ability of the heavenly cicada transformation. Xia Shaochan, whose core of combat was speed and explosive power, was so fast that Han Fei didn't dare to underestimate her after she displayed the heavenly cicada transformation. Therefore, others had no idea that in all the battles, the only one who could fight with the martial emperor was Xia Shaochan. Unfortunately, others couldn't watch the battle, so they didn't know the details of the battle. However, if Han Fei could watch here, he would definitely find that the martial emperor fighting with Xia Shaochan was much weaker than the one fighting with him. If he observed carefully, he would definitely find that the martial emperor fighting with different people was stronger than the trial taker. Basically, the trial takers were in a state of being suppressed. Xia Shaochan was the same. It seemed that she was fighting back and forth, but in fact, she was still being suppressed. And what they were competing for was the ability to resist pressure. After more than 10 minutes, Xia Shaochan felt that she had consumed too much energy. If she continued to fight like this, she wouldn't be able to win at all. She immediately gave up absorbing power, gritted her teeth, and crushed the star bead. She thought to herself, I shouldn't be too far behind. After all, this person is too strong, ridiculously strong. When Xia Shaochan appeared on the field, she only saw people everywhere. Countless experts of the merman race let out a roar that was as loud as a tsunami. A mermaid said, Your Highness, you're so powerful. You've held on for 10 minutes, which is unprecedented. Look, our mermaid royal family is the real strongest race after all. Who can compete with us? Ha! Duan Wu, Li Xinghan, I'm the only one who can be called the strongest. Even Li Xinghan, Duan Wu, and the others looked complicated at this moment. How could a martial monarch hold out for such a long time? However, after seeing Xia Shaochan come out, very few people immediately thought of Han Fei. In fact, someone had already asked this. Someone from the Snow God Palace said, Your master, Saint Child has not appeared yet. Could it be that Lord Holy Child is a hidden peerless genius? Saint Person. However, Saint Person. She only lasted for 24 breaths of time. When she came out and didn't see Shuizhan, she knew that Shuizhan had most likely returned to his original body. If, the battle, this time. If this avatar were to engage in a life and death battle, it would probably be on par with him. Therefore, when she didn't see the doppelganger come out after waiting for 30 seconds, she knew it was time to inform the people of the Snow God's temple of the fact that Shuizhan had died. Bai Muling and Situ Yuhong also realized that something was wrong. Although they hoped that Han Fei died in this door, they had seen Han Fei's strength. It would be strange if that guy died. Xia Shaochan looked around. Seeing that Han Fei hadn't come out yet, she grabbed a mermaid and asked, How many people haven't come out? The man hurriedly said, Your Highness, I don't know. We didn't count them before. However, Yan Meng said, So far, a total of 293 people haven't come out. Among them, the vast majority had probably perished. In a moment, the door will close. If anyone hasn't come out by then, they will have died. Xia Shaochan's face changed slightly. Han Fei couldn't have died. He had so many tricks up his sleeve. The martial emperor might not be his match. In the door, Han Fei had consumed 100 wisps of chaotic energy. He had been fighting for about 10 minutes. At this moment, Han Fei was crazy, and the martial emperor was crazy too. The two of them were locked in a fierce battle. Even though Han Fei felt pain all over his body, he had no chance or time to switch to the great path of heavenly enlightenment to heal himself. However, the pain in his body made Han Fei realize that he might not be able to hold on for long. If he didn't use the great path of heavenly enlightenment, he would probably collapse. However, Han Fei couldn't admit defeat in this trial. This was related to whether he could enter the Void Temple or not. I must win. The divine weapon is waiting for me, and a lot of people. Oh no. A lot of senior brothers and sisters are waiting for me in the void. I can't lose this battle. While Han Fei was using time reversal again, he thought to himself, why is this martial emperor so strong? Every time I get stronger, he gets stronger. Besides, why didn't I see through the information of the golden-winged rock just now? Could it be that this trial was fake? Or is it because it's the projection of the martial emperor? That's not right. If it's fake, why do I feel it so clearly? Furthermore, he could even communicate with the martial monarch verbally. No, I can't go on like this. I have to test this person's strength again. Otherwise, if I just rely on the great path of time, I may not be able to defeat this guy even when my chaotic energy is exhausted. Under the blue halo, Han Fei's eyes flickered. I have to try to see why this person is so strong. Immediately, Han Fei withdrew the power of the great path and restored his original combat power. Anyway, if he couldn't, he would be instantly blown up. At that time, he could use the great path of time and return to the peak of his combat power. However, when Han Fei's strength plummeted, a surprising scene happened. Although the martial emperor still attacked quickly, it was far from being able to kill him instantly. Boom! Han Fei's violent blow made the two retreat. Damn! Did I waste 100 strands of chaotic energy? Han Fei didn't feel good at all. He should have discovered it earlier. How can someone always get stronger and stronger than you? If he is really so strong, why didn't he kill me at the beginning? It turned out that the strength of this martial emperor was just a little bit stronger than his current state. Therefore, he felt that no matter what state he was in, he was always weaker than him. Therefore, even if Han Fei didn't use the power of the Great Path, he wouldn't be really defeated. Those 100 strands of chaotic energy were wasted, weren't they? As soon as he discovered this, Han Fei already felt that something was wrong. This fight might be real. But the opponent's strength was definitely not that strong. Just now, he was ridiculously strong. If this martial emperor was really so strong that he could break through the chaotic ocean as a half-king realm, then wouldn't the king realm become a decoration? Besides, the golden-winged rock didn't show any information, which made Han Fei realize that no matter how real what he was experiencing now was, it was definitely not real. Then he thought of the original question. No matter how strong this martial emperor was, how could he have thousands of clones to fight everyone at the same time? If he was really a venerable emperor, maybe he had this ability. However, the martial emperor had long been a legend in the martial emperor city. All that was left was just a test. The more Han Fei thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. The violence in his eyes was getting fainter and fainter. Suddenly, Han Fei seemed to understand something. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he dispersed the great path of time and no longer used spiritual energy. Like an ordinary person, Han Fei stood quietly on the river. In an instant, the surrounding scene seemed to have changed. The waves that had been surging in the world like water curtains calmed down in an instant. Under Han Fei's body, the ground was as smooth as a mirror. The next moment, when a fist shadow attacked him, Han Fei was calm, only to see that the fist shadow passed through his body. Then, on the opposite side of Han Fei, a smile slowly appeared on the face of the martial emperor. You got it. The corners of Han Fei's mouth curled up. It was at that moment that I realized that you are not a martial emperor. You are, a thought in my heart. Han Fei raised his head and said confidently, in everyone's heart, there is an invincible shadow. Even if you have mastered the art of invincibility, you will still feel that there will be someone stronger than you in this world. The martial emperor opposite him said, Isn't that right? Han Fei sneered. In terms of realms, there is indeed an insurmountable gap. No matter how strong a half-king is, he can't defeat an emperor. This is what most people think. Therefore, it is impossible for them to become invincible. However, it wasn't until just now that I realized that the so-called invincibility is not really invincible among the thousands of races in the sea or in this world. It turns out that invincibility has always been your own invincibility. It is a kind of Taoist heart that is fearless of the world. When Han Fei said this, on the other side of his green jade stone bridge, the road of invincibility occupied by the great path of invincibility slowly melted. In the end, the melted road of invincibility turned into a golden mist and drilled into Han Fei's body. And Han Fei's heart was slowly plated with a layer of gold. With the beating of his heart, golden halos rushed to the center of Han Fei's eyebrows. Dum, dum dum, dum on the center of Han Fei's eyebrows, an eye slowly opened, becoming Han Fei's third eye. At the moment this eye appeared, the image of the martial emperor opposite began to disappear. The second update. Please vote, end of this chapter. Chapter 1844. Outside. It had been more than 150 minutes since the start of the second trial. After these 100 breaths, many people had a premonition that something was about to happen. Someone sighed. He hasn't come out yet. There's no need to look anymore. Those people must have died in it. Someone said, I believe he said he could hold on for 30 minutes. After seeing the mermaid princess, I also believe he could hold on for 80 minutes. However, it's almost 160 minutes. It's impossible. Someone shook his head. That Han Fei of the Avengers is strong, but he can't be this strong, can he? The challenge inside is extremely difficult. I guess he can't come out. Someone sneered. What do you know? This challenge is not over yet. Although I don't know Han Fei well, I think he will win. At least, he can kidnap the mermaid princess. Who else can do this? Xia Shaochan was calm at the moment. She was very sure that Han Fei couldn't have died. They were both 9-star beads, so the person Han Fei met should be on par with her. Logically speaking, Xia Shaochan didn't think that person could beat Han Fei. She even thought that Han Fei had a higher chance of winning. The reason why he hadn't come out yet could only mean that Han Fei was still fighting. Ever since he was a child, Han Fei had always been the best when it came to endurance. This time was no exception. Long Wu and Pearl of the Witch Pirates, as well as a few others, had some doubts because of the previous battle. After the incident in the glass sky, at least the 4 generals knew Han Fei's identity. The only ones who had contact with Han Fei were Long Wu and Pearl. Both of them lasted for more than 20 minutes. However, they only lasted for 21 breaths before they were defeated. Now, the two looked at each other. Long Wu looked at Pearl and asked, is he really okay? Pearl shook her head slightly. You've seen it yourself. You should know that in this world, there will always be someone stronger than you. I don't think he has died. Suddenly, someone said, look, the shadow of the door is beginning to fade. Someone exclaimed, oh. He hasn't come out yet. I'm afraid there's no chance, right? Even Zhang Luotian and the others couldn't help but frown. Could it be that they had misjudged the situation? Would Han Fei really die here? Pooh! In the midst of the crowd's astonishment, a pair of hands reached out from the rift of the 4th door. Hiss! There's someone else inside. At this moment, Xia Shaochan smiled. I knew this guy would be fine. Rushing out at the last second was too despicable. Han Fei even opened the black fog gate and stepped out, looking very calm. There was a slight smile on his face. However, the third eye on his forehead had disappeared without a trace. At this moment, the hearts of Zhang Luotian and the others jolted. Everyone looked at each other, unable to conceal the shock in their hearts. Ling Yuan said, he broke the record. Han Fei was merely the current palace master of the yin-yang heavens. How could he be so tyrannical? He actually broke the record of a martial king. Yan Meng said, this is a good thing. It means that the martial emperor's inheritance this time is very interesting. It also means that, this person is extremely powerful. Zhang Luotian, interesting. The only pity is that he didn't take a 10-star golden bead. Everyone shrugged slightly, and Baiyu said, maybe he still has a chance. In the end, the exact number of completion points will depend on the next 2 trials. After Han Fei came out, he immediately found Xia Shaochan. Under the gaze of Sword Regret, Song Kaiyuan, and countless others, he clapped hands with Xia Shaochan and announced his victory. Xia Shaochan said to him via voice transmission, that martial emperor was so powerful. How could you hold on until now? Now, even I don't know how strong you are. Han Fei smiled. What can I do? If I'm not strong, how can I win your favor? Xia Shaochan rolled her eyes. Don't be so smug. Don't think you're great just because you got the first place. I'm the second place, and I can surpass you in minutes. Han Fei grinned and said, I believe you. Now, you're better than me in one aspect. Xia Shaochan was puzzled. What? Han Fei's eyes revealed a trace of obscenity. When you move. Pooh. Cough, cough. Han Fei suddenly raised his head and looked at the place where the kings were, and his face suddenly darkened. Fuck, who are these people? To the ears of others, it was very bad. Xia Shaochan was stunned for a while, but seeing the reaction of the kings, she suddenly blushed. I'll bite you to death. Yan Meng glanced at Bai Yu, who couldn't hold back, rolled her eyes, and immediately took a step forward. Her crisp voice resounded through the void. In this test, anyone who stays in the door for less than 10 seconds will be eliminated. The number of eliminated people is a total of 11,092. I don't need to tell you who exactly you are. The position you are standing in has already explained everything. Hiss, suddenly, there was an uproar in the field. More than 10,000 people were eliminated in one go. Was she serious? However, the rules had always been set by the martial emperor city. Those who had been eliminated also realized that the second round of the trial was too difficult. Someone said regretfully, alas, I was just a little bit short. I was just half a second short, and I made it. Someone shook his head. Even if you can't make it, so what? After all, you're still not strong enough. There are a total of 6,164 people left. Which one of them is worse than you? A half-king realm powerhouse saw that among the 6,164 people, there were some advanced venerables. Even intermediate venerables and beginner venerables. At that time, he felt that it was unfair. However, this was not a test that only depended on strength, so those who failed could only give up. However, someone still raised a question. Seniors, according to the time, why are there 4 doors? Why are there star marks on the golden beads? As if she had expected someone to ask this question, Yan Meng replied indifferently, for doors means that the opportunities you encounter in different doors are completely different. However, for everyone, the difficulty doesn't change. It's divided into 4 doors to prepare for the third assessment. And the golden beads represent your luck. In the inheritance test of the invincible realm, luck is more important than strength. If you fail first, it means that your luck is only enough. That's all I have to say. Those who are eliminated must leave this place within 100 seconds. Yan Meng's explanation was quite cold. After teasing Xia Shaochan, Han Fei's heart slightly sank. Because in his mind, a new piece of information emerged. Name of Invincible Eye. Introduction. This is a kind of heaven-defying eye created by the road to the invincible realm. It's a strange divine eye that was born because there is no fear in the heart. When this eye is opened, it can trigger the strongest invincible intent, doubling its combat power, which is comparable to a divine skill. According to the strength of the cultivator, the effect varies when using it. Quality: a Dao level. Consumption: a chaotic gas. Note: the stronger the strength, the less consumption. The effect of multiplying his strength greatly refreshed Han Fei. If his strength was multiplied, he would probably be able to fight a challenger king for real. However, what attracted Han Fei's attention more was the grade called Dao level. This was a grade that Han Fei had never seen before. Han Fei didn't know if this invincible eye was still the power of Dao. Because the road to the invincible realm had dissipated and turned into the invincible heart and the invincible eye. But in any case, he made a fortune this time. Everyone thought that he had held on for such a long time, but who knew that he had defeated a martial emperor? When Han Fei came back to his senses, Yan Meng was saying, the third trial is a secret realm trial, which tests comprehension. The whole trial is divided into a physical trial and a soul trial, lasting 26 days. Once the time is up, the secret realm itself will give an answer whether you pass or not. In the secret realm, you are not allowed to kill each other. I will observe the secret realm later. Anyone who violates this rule will be expelled from the secret realm immediately. From now on, you have 1 hour to rest. After 1 hour, the trial will continue. As soon as Yan Meng finished speaking, someone began to talk to each other via voice transmission. Someone said, the third trial is known as the death trial. It is said that the passing rate is less than 1 in 100. Although there are more than 6,000 people here, in fact, only a few can pass the third trial. Someone gritted his teeth. In any case, we've already come here. We have to give it a try. What if we succeed? Some people encouraged secretly, and some sighed at the difficulty of this trial. Han Fei said, "Girl, I feel that this so-called trial is just a trial. The difficulty of the trial is extremely high. The third trial is a test of comprehension. I don't think it's very dangerous. The key is to think fast. You have to think about something that others don't dare to think about." Han Fei recalled the previous battles. Who could have thought that the road to invincibility was actually just the first step of the road to invincibility? Finding this road didn't mean completely comprehending the road to invincibility. It had a second form. Xia Shaochan said lazily, "I know. Don't forget that my comprehension has always been higher than yours." Han Fei glared at her. "Who said that?" "When I was a child, I understood it as soon as you said it." Han Fei rolled his eyes. "Then what if I didn't say it?" Xia Shaochan tilted her head. "If you didn't say it, I would have understood it later. Besides, since this is a secret realm, we can be together. Just say it, and I'll definitely understand it." Han Fei thought, that's true. Then, he slammed his head on Xia Shaochan's head. "You have to use your brain too. What if I can't understand it?" Many mermaids and mermaids were enraged when they saw Han Fei's head being smashed. They didn't dare to say anything. "I'm a princess. How can you bully me?" But Xia Shaochan seemed quite happy and didn't care at all. At that time, many mermaids and mermen felt uncomfortable. They had to break the taboo between the mermaids and the human race. It wouldn't be easy to deal with them in the future. 2 hours later. Zhang Luotian flicked his finger, and the mountains more than 10 kilometers away shook. One of the mountains actually split open, revealing a pitch-black path. Zhang Luotian shouted, "The third trial, begin." Third trial. Please vote for me, end of this chapter. Chapter 1845. That mountain was originally an ordinary mountain. However, when people walked into the crack, they seemed to walk into an endless abyss towards the unknown. Han Fei and Xia Shaochan walked hand in hand. Since the third trial was a secret realm trial, the two of them naturally had nothing to worry about. Sure enough, when the two walked into the dark crack, their eyes lit up again. More than 6,000 people were standing on a cliff. In front of them was a dense forest. However, if they wanted to go to the other end, they had to pass through this cliff that was more than 10 kilometers long. It was reasonable to say that at the Venerable Realm, a mere 10 kilometers was nothing. However, since the level was set here, how could it be so easy to pass? Between the gaps of the cliff, there was a visible wind current. The reason why it was visible was that the wind shook the void, causing the void to be unstable. This level was very suitable for people who cultivated the great way of wind. Therefore, in the crowd, Han Fei saw an acquaintance. He directly led a group of people and got up. This person was Li Xuanfeng of the Windcutter sect. Li Xuanfeng stepped into the wind, and his whole body turned into a blue light, swaying in the wind, like an erratic fallen leaf, swaying in the sky. Following Li Xuanfeng were naturally several disciples of the Windcutter sect. These people were roughly in the same situation as Li Xuanfeng, but their speed was not as fast as Li Xuanfeng. In less than 10 seconds, the blue light that Li Xuanfeng had turned into recondensed into a figure on the opposite cliff. He glanced back and then walked into the dense forest without looking back. After a while, when all the disciples of the wind cutter sect passed through the wind, many people also stepped into the air. Although what they cultivated was not the great way of wind, they should be able to handle this opening dish. However, when one of them just flew a few hundred meters, suddenly, his whole body swayed uncontrollably. Puff, puff, puff. Everyone could see that this person was pierced by the wind. This person roared, "There's something wrong with the space here." After that, this person's body seemed to be stuck. In the void, he couldn't borrow strength at all. Sometimes, he wanted to step on the wind blades and move forward. Unfortunately, his understanding of the great way of wind was too shallow, and he thought that he could step on the wind. As a result, his body was madly cut. In the end, this person fell off the cliff and was chopped into a mist of blood. Hiss, many people sucked in a breath of cold air. Will there be deaths at the beginning of the third trial? Why did this person die so easily? Fortunately, someone said, "Don't worry, I've never heard of a chance of dying on this path. This is just a simple trial. I reckon this person hasn't died yet." However, there weren't many people who agreed with this person, mainly because those involved in the situation couldn't see clearly. After witnessing something with his own eyes, there would always be some fear in his heart. Just now, 7 or 8 people had gone in a row. The furthest one had walked was only about 3,000 meters. In the end, they seemed to be bound by space and fell. Humph! At this moment, Li Xinghen walked out of the crowd, too lazy to wait. With a whoosh, he turned into a golden thread. Bang, 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 the wind barriers and the void shattered one after another along the way. In less than half a breath's time, he had already forcefully broken through the trial and arrived at the cliff. Hiss! Someone smiled bitterly. Is this the power of a heavenly talent? Breaking through the barrier was completely unreasonable. He directly broke through the barrier. With Li Xinghen leading the way, there were many people who forced their way through. Almost all of the experts swiftly flew past. Some people broke through, and some people showed their power. This first trial was not difficult. Most people with a little talent could pass the trial independently. Even if some people were weak, they called more people to break through together. In just a moment, among the more than 6,000 people, less than 200 people fell off the cliff, and the others all passed. And Han Fei and Xia Shaochan were still standing leisurely behind, waiting. Xia Shaochan said, let's go too." Han Fei said, "I don't think it's that simple." Xia Shaochan was confused. Huh? Han Fei said, "Don't forget, this test lasts as long as 26 days. That is to say, the entire inheritance of the invincible realm and all the time of the trial are here. The time of the last trial is only 1 day. It can be seen that this trial is very important. Since it's said that this trial is a test of comprehension, then there might be a reason for everything that's happening here." Xia Xiaochan's heart did a flip. You mean the appearance of this cliff is also for us to comprehend something? Han Fei nodded. Of course. Otherwise, what's the point of its existence? Is it just to intercept those 100 or 200 people? Xia Shaochan shook her head. I haven't learned the great way of wind. Han Fei said, most people haven't walked this road. However, this trial just happened to appear here. I think there's something wrong here. Shall I go and have a try? Xia Shaochan nodded. It's safe for me to go. Han Fei asked, what can you comprehend by flashing all the way? It's up to me. With that, Han Fei stepped into the cliff. When he entered this open space on the cliff, Han Fei felt how strong the wind was. Although there were no wind blades, Han Fei still felt that his body was creaking because of the friction. When Han Fei took the sea-shaking wind bead, he had already comprehended the great way of wind. To be honest, it only improved his speed by less than 10%. Of course, this was also because he didn't study this great way in depth. Otherwise, the effect wouldn't be bad no matter which path he took. At this moment, Han Fei keenly grasped the location of every wind force. He stepped on the void and walked on the wind. And when the wind raged, the direction of the wind contained infinite changes. Almost immediately, Han Fei understood that in the fast-flowing wind, the wind was not a whole. The airflow itself could actually be disassembled into countless wind bundles, and the wind bundles would be consumed at every moment and every stage of space. As long as he grasped the wind's consumption, he could move freely in the wind. Xia Shaochan watched from the outside. Then she saw Han Fei suddenly turned into an unfamiliar shadow, and it seemed that the entire cliff was filled with Han Fei's blurred figure. Of course, Xia Shaochan was not stupid. She was also fast. After seeing Han Fei's footsteps, she was a little confused. Didn't they say that there was also a problem with space? When Han Fei appeared on the other side, he looked back at Xia Shaochan. Do you understand? Xia Shaochan nodded. Wait for me. After a while, when Xia Shaochan reached the other side of the cliff, she said in surprise, there is no problem with space. The person who fell down was just talking nonsense. Han Fei said, it's not nonsense. It's just that he didn't understand it. The pressure of the wind forces the void, giving him the feeling that two kinds of great waves were exerting pressure on him. In fact, if he mastered the real wind-walking method, there would be no space pressure. But this kind of test is just a kind of skill. After understanding it, I don't know what it's for. Xia Shaochan said, forget it. There are only the two of us left. Let's catch up. Han Fei smiled. Believe it or not, they will come back. Huh? Han Fei said, no matter how stupid they are, they will find the problem. As soon as Han Fei said so, he saw Song Kaiyuan and the others slowly walking out of the forest. Looking at their posture, it was clear that they didn't go in at all but had been watching here secretly for a long time. When Han Fei passed by them, he said lightly, I've known it for a long time. Why did you wait until now? Song Kaiyuan said, yes, but I don't want to show it to those people. It's always a good thing that they understand it later. Because he knew that there were people watching outside, and he estimated that some people would come back to walk this cliff again, Han Fei didn't talk to them but walked straight into the forest. He didn't panic at all. This was a trial to test his completion rate. There was no point in rushing in blindly. Even though Han Fei and the others were a little slower, after a while, they also stepped into a pure black forest. In this forest, perception completely lost its effect. Kacha! Han Fei accidentally stepped on a withered branch on the ground, and his pupils constricted immediately. Fuck! Han Fei knew that something was wrong and entered the array. When he turned his head and looked to the side, Xia Shaochan was gone. At this moment, Han Fei didn't feel good. He knew that this kind of place that restricted perception was very strange. As a matter of fact, he had only taken a few steps when he entered an unknown formation. Besides, Han Fei felt the Tao of space, which meant that from the moment he stepped on the twig just now, he was no longer in the original position. Array? Han Fei looked around. In this darkness, the visibility was only about 5 meters. However, Han Fei saw a fiery red light, so he walked in the direction of the red light. After walking for about 30 meters, he found that it was a burning torch. It was stuck on a stone pillar. It seemed to be a special place for placing torches. Behind the torch was a withered tree, and Han Fei could vaguely see that there seemed to be a big hole in the withered tree. He immediately picked up the torch and approached, only to find that on the tree, there was a big mouth open, and the big black hole in the mouth led to nowhere. Deliberately mystifying. Han Fei glanced at the torch in his hand and stepped directly into the tree hole. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1846. When Han Fei entered the tree hole, he actually broke into another darkness from one place of darkness. At this moment, Han Fei's perception was still blocked. The only thing Han Fei could do was to rely on the torch in his hand to illuminate this darkness. Of course, Han Fei also tried to burn spiritual energy, but found that spiritual energy couldn't be ignited in the darkness at all. He didn't know what was so special about this torch. It could actually play the role of illumination in this world of darkness. The coverage of the fire was actually not large, only 4 or 5 meters square, and it could slightly illuminate the scene more than 10 meters away. Han Fei felt that he suddenly stepped on the air. Yes, under his body became a cliff, and Han Fei completely stepped on the air. Not only did it become a cliff under his feet, but Han Fei also felt a heavy force on his shoulders. However, at the moment when his feet stepped on the air, Han Fei felt a trace of the power of the wind. Han Fei seemed to understand something. Han Fei held the torch in his hand and quickly stepped on the nodes in the wind. Only in this way could he keep his body from falling. However, the power of this wind was too light, almost to the point that it was almost imperceptible. If Han Fei hadn't just figured out how to step on the nodes where the wind disappeared, he would have fallen. At this moment, he was afraid that he could only fall. He didn't know what the consequences of falling would be, but this extremely weak wind seemed to be a life-saving straw. At this moment, although the breeze was relatively light, at least it was not scattered. The wind under his feet blew from all directions, but in one direction. As long as Han Fei grasped the direction of the wind, he would naturally be able to go to the place where he should go in this darkness. Sure enough, about a moment later, Han Fei saw a pillar with a torch. On that pillar, there was an unlit torch. No matter how stupid Han Fei was, he understood this, so he simply lit the torch. When the torch was lit, there was no wind under Han Fei's feet, and the void became solid. He landed on the ground again. Interesting. Starting from the great way of wind, it becomes more and more difficult. This is much more difficult to walk than that cliff. The corners of Han Fei's mouth curled up slightly. Although it was more difficult here, it couldn't stop most people. Even though most of them had not truly comprehended the first trial, they were all paragons of the half-king realm. Han Fei couldn't help but look back, only to see a red dot far away on the way here. It looked like a burning flame. That was the path he had taken to get here. This meant that the path here could be taken back. At this moment, Han Fei didn't intend to turn around immediately. Since he was already here, why was he in such a hurry to go back? In this mystic realm, the test that everyone received was probably different. It was probably not a good thing to covet low risk. Han Fei believed that such a difficulty was absolutely no problem for Xia Shaochan. After all, they were all top-notch geniuses. Their talents, bloodlines, and battle prowess were not weak at all. In this kind of mystic realm trial, with the difficulty of the obstacles she had encountered so far, did they think they could stump her? The possibility was extremely low. Therefore, he did not need to worry too much. After weighing the pros and cons, he continued to move forward. When Han Fei raised his head and looked forward, he saw that the sparks on the torch were blown by the breeze. In this darkness where there was no direction at all, the direction in which the sparks flew was the only clue that Han Fei could refer to. Of course, Han Fei could use the nautical panorama to confirm it, but it was not necessary now. Following the direction of the sparks, Han Fei walked no more than 30 meters and saw another deformed tree. On the tree, there was also a hideous big hole with a gaping mouth. In the hole, it was still dark. Han Fei entered again without hesitation. Fearlessness would only make Han Fei careful, but not afraid. With the experience from the last time, this time, as soon as Han Fei entered the tree hole, he immediately felt where the wind was. Sure enough, the environment was exactly the same as the last tree hole. There was still nothing under his feet, so he could only step on the breeze. But this time, some sword marks appeared in the air with a swish. These sword marks appeared silently, a bit like Xia Shaochan's shadowless saber. In this place where perception was ineffective and visibility was almost less than 5 meters, the sword marks appeared too fast. Even Han Fei couldn't help but look nervous. In fact, these sword marks were not pointing at Han Fei himself, but at the torch in Han Fei's hand. Since Han Fei understood the importance of the torch, How could he let these sword marks extinguish the torch? Once the torch was extinguished, this trial would come to an end. Hum, clank, clank, clank. With a thought from Han Fei, the infinity water flew out and directly formed a knife array, sealing the space around the torch. Soon, Han Fei lit a new torch on a new stone platform. The breeze came again, blowing the flickering sparks and continuing to lead the way for Han Fei. And Han Fei had a judgment in his heart. This was a trial with increasing difficulty. In this trial, every time a torch was lit, it was equivalent to completing a small stage of the trial. However, when would such a trial end? Why was the beginning based on the comprehension of the wind? If the opponent didn't comprehend it at the beginning, then when the difficulty reached the extreme, wouldn't it be impossible to play? When Han Fei entered the next tree hole, he found that it was true. In front of him, it was still the same routine as before, but this time there were creatures attacking in the dark. Another tree hole with a divine soul attack. Han Fei kept passing levels. The difficulty of the levels became higher and higher, including all kinds of attack methods. Han Fei had to pay attention to his footwork, protect the torch, fight with others, and pay attention to soul attacks. In the end, it even began to rain. Han Fei felt that the torch in his hand was just an ordinary torch. What if it got wet? It would probably be extinguished directly. Han Fei wanted to protect the torch with a spiritual energy protective cover. However, the protective cover didn't work. Fortunately, Han Fei could also control water. As soon as the water was under control, the great wave of water began to spread in the water over there. The water under Han Fei's control was all frozen into frost and finally turned into ice blades. Han Fei's spiritual sense was so powerful that he could control the ice blades at will. Under the various tests, Han Fei passed 17 levels all the way. When he came to the 18th level, Han Fei felt that if the difficulty continued to increase, he really didn't know whether or not he could go deeper and further when many abilities were restricted. No wonder some people said that the third level of the trial was a death trial. Han Fei dared to bet that no more than 1/10 of the more than 6,000 people could make it here. On the 18th level, when Han Fei continued to walk into the tree hole, this time, the environment was a little beyond Han Fei's expectations. Han Fei was still holding the torch in his hand. However, it was no longer the void under his feet, so he didn't feel like falling. However, Han Fei sensed an extremely strong sense of danger. Han Fei subconsciously blocked it with a knife. Swish! When the sword light swept over, Han Fei's heart skipped a beat. Time seemed to freeze. In Han Fei's eyes, there was only the sword light. In an instant, Han Fei seemed to see a lot of power. It seemed to be a combination of many Daos. The sword chi seemed to contain the Tao of wind, with infinite changes, and it was difficult to grasp its direction. The sword chi also seemed to contain the Tao of water. If this sword chi was broken in an instant, it would instantly explode, lock on him, and put out the torch. The sword chi also seemed to contain a method to attack the soul. This sword chi was obviously an unbelievably slow lock-on technique. This sword chi was very slow, so slow that it was only 5 meters away. Han Fei could circle around it several times. However, this was a lock-on technique. Its power, while moving, was continuing to increase. The longer it was delayed, the more powerful it would be. Han Fei's eyelids twitched a few times. Han Fei stretched out his hand, drew in the air, and a crack appeared in the void. However, when the sword chi arrived, there was a cracking sound. The void shattered and turned into a strange energy that was directly absorbed by the sword chi, causing its power to increase once again. Han Fei was still half a meter away from this sword. Han Fei's fingers were moving left and right of the sword chi. If it was just to break this attack by force, Han Fei was confident that he could do it. However, he was still holding the torch in his hand. In this darkness, he couldn't connect to the demon purification pot at all. Naturally, the torch couldn't be stored in the demon purification pot. At this moment, in the outside world, a few pairs of eyes were watching this scene. Who else could it be but Zhang Luotian and the others? One of them, a bearded man, couldn't help but say, "This kid passed the levels very fast." In less than half a day, he passed 17 levels in a row. The problem is that he hasn't failed yet. He doesn't even know that he can try again. Bai Yu sneered. "Are you interested in him?" The bearded man nodded slightly. "It's useless for me to be interested in him. This fellow was not a small fry to begin with. It's said that although he is now half a king, he has fought many kings. Although he hasn't won, he hasn't lost yet, right?" As he spoke, he glanced at Yan Meng. Yan Meng said, "If he can pass the tribulation and become a king, the yin-yang heaven will definitely have a chance to return. The problem is that even if he manages to stall Chen Huangdian, there are still experts in the 36 Xuanshans. There are many people who don't want to return to the yin-yang heaven. I'm afraid it won't be easy for him to return to the yin-yang heaven." Zhang Luotian said, "If his completion rate is as high as 95%, why won't he be able to return to the yin-yang heaven?" Everyone couldn't help but look at Zhang Luotian. Such a high completion rate has never been seen before. "Why do you think so highly of him?" Zhang Luotian said casually, "It's not that I think highly of him, but that he is extremely lucky. Besides, he is extremely strong. It's been 80,000 years, and he came at the time when the imperial palace was born. Do you think? Is this a coincidence, or something else?" Second update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1847. Outside, a group of challengers was watching the show. However, Han Fei was very focused at this moment. He had many ways to directly break that terrifying sword strike. However, he hadn't thought of a way to break this sword strike without causing any impact at all. In fact, the key to breaking this sword strike was not to break it itself, nor was it to protect the torch. If it was just to protect the torch, Han Fei could engrave arrays around the torch. But in this way, he would lose the meaning of challenging this sword strike. So far, it seemed that all the levels that Han Fei had experienced were prepared for this one. This wisp of sword intent contained too many elements. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. Han Fei was still retreating, reaching out to the other side of the sword qi. Han Fei tried to extract the power of this wisp of sword qi with the knife drawing technique. However, he couldn't really do it. Although Han Fei had passed 17 levels in a row. In fact, the distance between each level was no more than a kilometer. It seemed that he could completely retreat. However, Han Fei didn't want to retreat. Therefore, Han Fei had to retreat within a kilometer to find a way to break this blow. Similarly, if it was to pass for the sake of passing, Han Fei had already passed. However, what Han Fei wanted was the completion rate. For others, this was a pass. For Han Fei, this was a trial from his sect, a trial from the Void Temple. The two concepts could not be mentioned in the same breath. The key point of this trial is comprehension. In other words, if I want to pass this level perfectly, I have to wake up on my own first. Fuck, if only old Yuan was here. Han Fei's face was dark. After a while, he had retreated more than 300 meters. The power of the sword qi was getting stronger and stronger. Han Fei held the torch in one hand while retreating. Han Fei murmured, "This sword strike includes all the power that I have experienced before. It stands to reason that when so many great Daos merge together, there will definitely be conflicts. It will collapse, but why is this sword strike fine? This is indeed a sword qi that has fused many great Daos together. But in the end, it's still just a strand of sword qi. Rather than saying that many grand Daos have fused into this strand of sword qi, it would be better to say that this strand of sword qi can take the form of any grand Dao." Han Fei raised his hand, and holy light appeared. However, Han Fei didn't launch an attack. He was just testing it. When the holy light was fused into the sword qi, Han Fei tried to fuse it with the law of gravity. In the end, the holy light in his hand was extinguished in an instant. That's not right. The great Daos clash. There's definitely something wrong with this wisp of sword chi that I saw. Han Fei shook his head slightly and stopped looking at the great path on the sword chi. Instead, he retreated in silence. When he retreated to about 700 meters, he saw that he would be beaten back in another 300 meters. If he still couldn't decipher this sword at the last moment, he could only forcefully shatter it. Who? At this time, Han Fei felt a gust of wind, very light. Suddenly, it occurred to Han Fei that the beginning of the third trial was to comprehend charm. Then, he just had to keep increasing the difficulty. Now, the difficulty had increased to the limit, and this wisp of sword chi was formed. Han Fei couldn't help but think, wasn't the situation when he first embarked on the invincible path similar to now? At that time, no one knew how to block a random knife attack from him. After all, they couldn't block the invincible path, nor could they avoid it. They could only force it, and the result was certain failure. Now, this wisp of sword chi was equivalent to the invincible path, which meant that he had slashed an invincible sword chi for himself. If he were someone else, he might be able to break it by force. However, the only way to really compete with the invincible path was to have a firmer Taoist heart than the invincible path at that time. Once the Taoist heart was born, the invincible path would be broken. However, thinking of this, Han Fei frowned even more tightly. His Taoist heart was strong now, but the Taoist heart itself couldn't be used as a power, could it? Wait. Suddenly, Han Fei's eyes lit up. What if it was his own Tao? Since his spiritual energy decomposition rate reached 100%, it could even be said that no one in the entire chaotic ocean could match his Taoist heart. Unless, there was someone in the chaotic azure sea who had pushed the spiritual chi disassembly rate to 100%. His Taoist heart was so strong. How could he be afraid of a mere wisp of sword chi? This wisp of sword chi contained many Daos, and he had also mastered many Daos. He had a massive number of combat skills, but he couldn't break this sword. Wasn't it ridiculous? Hee. The distance he retreated had reached 800 meters. Han Fei suddenly smiled. Han Fei said, "What's the point of cultivating 1,000 great techniques? In the end, they are not as powerful as a wisp of sword chi. I might as well give them up." Han Fei suddenly stopped, slowly stretched out 2 fingers, and turned them into a sword. This sword didn't contain any Daos, but it seemed to contain a lot of Daos. This sword was simple and plain, like a child's stab, extremely slow, but also like a king's strike. When Han Fei used this sword, Zhang Luotian's eyes lit up, and he immediately shouted, "How dare you!" Bai Yu said in surprise, "He got it. This kid actually got it on the first try." Yan Meng said, "What he got seems to be a little different. This wisp of sword chi is even more complicated than the 18 divine swords. But on the surface, it looks extremely pure." The bearded man couldn't help but grin. Impressive, no wonder he can get the inheritance of the master of the Yin-Yang Heavenly Palace. Sure enough, he does have the capital. At this moment, Han Fei gave up many Daos and thousands of combat skills. However, this simplest strike was in line with his Daoist heart. It seemed simple, but it was invincible. It seemed unpretentious, but it was sharp. However, Han Fei's Daoist heart didn't represent Han Fei's Daos. Han Fei had so many Daos, and this strike was actually a sword strike that gathered a lot of Daos. Even all the combat skills that Han Fei had learned were gathered in this sword strike. At least, in this sword strike, Han Fei forgot a lot of combat skills. At this moment, Han Fei created his own swordsmanship. Clang! With a light sound, Han Fei's fingertips seemed to be emitting the aura of a king. With one finger, there was only one belief: break the barrier with the sword. At this moment, Han Fei held the torch in his left hand, and 2 fingers of his right hand condensed into a sword and stretched out. In front of him, the wisp of sword chi that had gathered all kinds of Daos was easily defeated by the power of Han Fei's 2 fingers. The raging storm of sword chi, starting from Han Fei's 2 fingers, instantly crushed the sword chi in front of him. However, it was a pity that Han Fei didn't know how powerful the blow he launched was. Because his field of vision was limited. After the power burst out, there was nothing he could do. Phew, Han Fei let out a long breath. Fortunately, at the last moment, he comprehended it. Han Fei couldn't help but look down at his 2 fingers. At that moment, Han Fei felt that his blow was very strong, stronger than the sacrificing punch and the draw technique. In terms of explosive power, it was stronger than these 2 great techniques, which meant that this was a supreme technique that could allow him to fight across realms. Han Fei couldn't help but sigh slightly. Unfortunately, I only comprehended this move. If I can comprehend another one, who can defeat me? Puff. Outside, someone couldn't help but say, "What is this kid thinking? Does he want to comprehend another set of such a great technique?" If it weren't for the inspiration of these 18 divine swords, even if he became a king, he wouldn't be able to comprehend this move. Zhang Luotian said, "Okay. Comprehending in half a day, my martial emperor city's record has been broken. What's there to brag about?" At this moment, the corners of Han Fei's mouth curled up slightly, and he couldn't help but say, "Zhang Xuanyu, look, only you can create your own combat skill, right? When I go back, I'll show you off." Han Fei licked the corner of his mouth. What should I call such a powerful blow? Well, this great technique is based on the Taoist heart and is obtained by abandoning and forgetting many combat skills. Hey, did that old man Ren Tianfei come up with the sacrificing punch in this way? No, I can't learn from this old man. I have to give it a famous name. This is a sword of Taoist aura. At the moment when the sword is out, the Taoist aura is restrained. Let's call it One Finger Dao Sword. No, it's too weak. This is clearly the fusion of many Daos. The unification of Daos. This name is not bad. Let's call it that. Han Fei couldn't help but grin. The unification of Daos. This was the first time in his life that he had created a combat skill by himself. Moreover, it was a super technique that was comparable to the sacrificing punch and saber drawing. It was enough for him to brag. After breaking the 18th level, Han Fei came to the stone platform of this level and lit the stone platform with a torch. At the moment when the stone platform was lit, Han Fei sighed in his heart. This is only the 18th level, but it's already so difficult. If there are still the 19th and 20th levels, do I have to keep creating my own combat skills? However, when the torch was lit, Han Fei's eyes suddenly lit up. In front of Han Fei's eyes, there was no longer darkness, but a vast expanse of whiteness. Han Fei saw that there were steps thousands of meters in front of him. On the steps, a huge gate stood. What was it if not the bronze gate? Gulp. Han Fei swallowed and looked back, only to see that he seemed to be tens of thousands of meters high in the sky. Behind him was the blue sky, and there were clouds and mist lingering below. Wow! Han Fei couldn't help swallowing again. Have I come to the southern heavenly gate? Seeing that there was no one here, Han Fei had already guessed that he was probably the first to come here. It was a pity that he couldn't tell Xia Shaochan about it. However, even if he told Xia Shaochan, there was nothing he could do. The path that he and she were walking was not the same. Xia Shaochan didn't have as many Daos as he did, so she was destined not to break that sword with the unification of Daos. But no matter what, Han Fei knew that Xia Shaochan could break that sword with brute force. The previous levels couldn't stop her. Han Fei guessed right. This bronze gate should be the second half of the trial. Yan Meng said, "This place tests the comprehension of the soul. I think it should be related to the soul, right?" Thinking so, Han Fei stepped on the steps. However, when Han Fei stood on the first step, he suddenly had a wonderful feeling. Han Fei suddenly turned around, only to gasp in shock. This part of the plot is coming to an end. I'm going back to the Yin Yang Heavenly King within this month. Please vote for me. End of this chapter. Chapter 1848. At the moment when Han Fei turned around, he was confused. Han Fei saw that at this time, there was another version of himself standing under the steps. Han Fei's first reaction was to look at himself and quickly determine his current state. Right now, he was clearly a soul body. No wonder Yan Meng said that this third trial had two parts, a physical trial and a soul trial. It turned out that what he had just experienced was just a physical trial. Han Fei was speechless. If the physical trial was so difficult, then what about the soul trial? Of course, what Han Fei said was difficult was to pass it perfectly. If he tried to pass it by force, the difficulty of the physical trial could only be said to be okay. On the 18th level, at least 50% to 60% of the participants could be eliminated. At this moment, Han Fei walked up the steps. For the time being, he hadn't felt the test from this soul trial. Han Fei didn't know what was so good about this trial. He thought this would be a place like the ideal palace. However, when Han Fei wanted to summon his weapon, it didn't work at all. However, when Han Fei wanted to use his power, he felt that his soul had power to use, but he didn't know how to use it. This feeling was as if there was a power that was bound within this soul body, and it was unable to unleash its power. The soul could be used to fight. Han Fei's Heavenly God Stab, Yin-Yang Reincarnation Knife, and 100 Beast Soul Devouring Roar could all be used as soul combat skills. Han Fei raised his hand and wanted to burst out the power of the Heavenly God Stab. However, for some unknown reason, this power remained at the tip of his finger, unable to be released. It was as if it had been locked by his soul. As soon as Han Fei climbed up the 100th step, for some reason, he felt a little hot in his body. However, Han Fei knew that this was not a physical body, but a soul body. How could a soul body become hot? Looking around and seeing that there was no danger, Han Fei continued to climb up the stairs. Finally, the heat on Han Fei's body turned into a burning stinging pain. At this time, Han Fei stopped and looked at the bronze gate. That gate seemed to be a gate towering in the sky. Looking up from the bottom, it was especially majestic. At this moment, Han Fei noticed that the snake in the T-shaped portrait on the bronze gate seemed to have a strange light in its eyes. So, this is the test. Someone else's gaze was like a divine light that suppressed his soul body. With just a gaze, he was unable to release his soul power at all. As expected, there was a reason for everything. He had only just ascended 1,000 steps, and he had already encountered such a situation. If nothing out of the ordinary happened, he would experience a different kind of feeling if he advanced another level. This seemed to be a custom in front of the bronze gate. Last time, and the time before that, it was all suppressive force. This time, it was just a different method, and what was being suppressed was only the divine soul. Of course, no matter how dangerous the road ahead was, it couldn't stop him. Han Fei had come all the way here to pass the test of the Void Temple. Han Fei thought that he had passed the previous trials perfectly. He absolutely could not lose this round. The bronze gate was right in front of him. Although Han Fei didn't know what the so-called fourth trial was, the bronze gate was right in front of him. However, the bronze gate was right in front of him. He had to get through it. When Han Fei raised his foot and crossed the 1,000-layered barrier, he felt that his soul seemed to be burning. It was completely different from the faint tingling just now. This kind of burning was like being thrown into a sea of fire. Although it didn't cause any harm to his soul body, the feeling of pain was extremely clear. In the blink of an eye, 5 days passed. On the steps, another person suddenly appeared. If Han Fei looked back, he would definitely find that, to his surprise, the person who came was not from the Grand Purity Palace or the Wuji Heaven, nor was it the chaotic dragon taming man, but Song Kaiyuan. Speaking of which, Song Kaiyuan was well-read and had a rich reserve of knowledge. When he was going through the 18th trial, he meditated for 5 days and finally found a way to crack it. At this moment, when Song Kaiyuan appeared in front of the steps, he saw Han Fei's back at first glance. Then, he looked up and saw the majestic and breathtaking bronze door full of celestial qi. Gulp! Song Kaiyuan couldn't help but take a breath, slowly walked up to Han Fei, and said, "Captain, what are you doing here?" Why don't you climb? However, when Song Kaiyuan asked this, he didn't get a response. When he turned his head, he found that Han Fei was like a piece of wood, motionless as if he didn't hear him at all. Huh? Song Kaiyuan immediately realized that something was wrong. When he looked at the steps again, he seemed to understand something. This should be a soul trial. Since Han Fei didn't respond, it meant that his soul was probably undergoing a trial. Song Kaiyuan immediately looked back, then stood next to Han Fei, and also stepped onto the steps. With this step, Song Kaiyuan's heart stirred. He suddenly looked back, only to find that his body was also fixed in place. He immediately understood what was going on. Sure enough, this soul trial was a way of trial without the physical body. However, when he looked up, he didn't see Han Fei's soul body. His first reaction was not that something had happened to Han Fei, but that he couldn't see at all. The souls on this path couldn't see each other at all. As a result, the spiritual trials that everyone went through seemed to be a path that they had to complete alone. Outside, Yan Meng said, when we get to the divine soul trial field, we can't see. However, a lot of people have been eliminated now. It's estimated that 1,000 people will enter the trial in the end. It's already very rare. Zhang Luotian said, putting Han Fei aside, the people of Taishian Heaven are really unparalleled in intelligence. Song Kaiyuan cracked the 18 divine swords, and his junior sister actually followed closely behind. Although Taishian Heaven is not good at fighting, we can't underestimate them. When Song Kaiyuan stepped on the steps, if he could see, he would definitely find that Han Fei was sitting cross-legged on the 1999 steps. At this moment, above Han Fei's soul, there was a raging flame burning. This strong flame didn't burn the soul, but it destroyed the will. However, Han Fei already had the invincible heart and a firm Taoist heart. How could this trivial flame burn through him? However, what made Han Fei stop was that he saw a figure on the steps above. That figure seemed to be waiting for him. Intuition told Han Fei that if he went over in his current state, once he stepped on the 2000th step, if he fought with that person, he could only escape. He couldn't fight, which was his biggest problem now. It stood to reason that his soul also had a lot of power, but it was suppressed. In the past, Han Fei had considered using a soul body, but he only thought that there were soul combat skills to cultivate, so he could fight as a soul. However, this was not the case. At this moment, Han Fei discovered that soul combat skills were just soul combat skills. It was very likely to be a manifestation of the power of the soul with the help of the physical body. But now, without a physical body, he only had a pure soul body. Han Fei suddenly found that all his power was tied up by his soul body and couldn't burst out. Han Fei thought to himself, the first 2000 step can be cleared with my Taoist heart alone. However, these last 1,000 steps might not be so simple. At this moment, Han Fei was constantly activating his power. However, he always felt that the power was in his body, but he just couldn't use it. Half a month later, Han Fei was still trying again and again. Han Fei looked back many times and saw that there were as many as 100 people under the steps. And Xia Shaochan was among these 100 people. However, he didn't see any of their souls appearing on these steps. Han Fei guessed that ordinary people couldn't see souls. Just like Yin, who often appeared in the sky meditation garden, but how many people could see Yin, On this day, Han Fei was irritated and cursed in his heart, it's impossible that I can't use the power. Unless this power is fake. Han Fei thought so. But if the power was fake, why could he feel it? At this moment, Han Fei felt that not far away, on the same step, a figure appeared. The figure seemed to be suffering from immense pain. As soon as he got on the steps, he sat down on the steps, panting. Song Kaiyuan. Han Fei said in surprise, you're here. Song Kaiyuan was also taken aback and looked at Han Fei, who was sitting cross-legged but relaxed, in astonishment. Captain. It turns out that you're here. Han Fei couldn't help but look back. So, I can only see you when I come to this step. Song Kaiyuan said, yes. But, Captain, how long have you been sitting here? As soon as I came, I saw your body standing below. Han Fei immediately said in annoyance, stop talking. I've been sitting here for half a month. Song Kaiyuan was dumbfounded. Does Han Fei mean that it only took him half a day to pass the previous physical trial? However, considering Han Fei's special identity, Song Kaiyuan was speechless. After all, Han Fei was the master of the Divine Palace. Song Kaiyuan said, Captain, you don't seem to be in pain. Why are you still sitting here? Han Fei pursed his lips and said, look. There seems to be someone ahead. I have all my strength, but I can't use it. I may not be able to beat him. Song Kaiyuan stared at the steps for a long time and then asked, why can't you use your strength? Han Fei glanced sideways and said, can you use your strength? Song Kaiyuan was stunned for a while. With a wave of his hand, the phantom of the heaven-severing brush appeared. The heaven-severing brush drew in the air and a soul sword light appeared, which stunned Han Fei. Hiss! Han Fei was speechless. What did you do? First update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1849. Han Fei saw that Song Kaiyuan had so easily realized the way to attack as a soul. And he had been trying for half a month, but he had found nothing. Han Fei didn't know what to say. Seeing Han Fei's surprised look, Song Kaiyuan seemed to understand that not everyone had studied many soul techniques like him. He had even studied souls. This was the advantage of the Taishian heaven. Song Kaiyuan said, in fact, it's not difficult to attack as a soul. Generally speaking, when the body and the soul are united, it's the soul that drives the body to complete what the heart wants. Because in our body, all the power we have is gathered. Although we can use divine soul battle skills, those are only battle skills. In fact, soul combat skills are just attaching the power of the soul to a certain normal form of energy. So, it's actually not very difficult to learn soul combat skills. Han Fei asked, what about this pure soul state now? However, Song Kaiyuan shook his head and said, in fact, our current state is not a pure soul state. The pure state of the divine soul was manifested by the dark blue soul fire. Our current godly soul is not a complete godly soul. Before that, we need to figure out the concepts. People don't only have souls, but also spirit bodies. Han Fei's eyelids twitched and he thought to himself, is it similar to the difference between a yin soul and a yang soul? Song Kaiyuan continued, of course, since we've separated from our physical bodies, our current form can be simply understood as a complex soul body formed from the combination of a soul body, a spirit body, and many other invisible forms. This kind of soul, because it is completely separated from the physical body, can't use any power in the physical body. However, because the soul and the physical body are closely connected, it makes you feel as if you can use the power of the physical body. In fact, in the soul state, we can only use soul power. Han Fei immediately asked, how do we use it? Song Kaiyuan explained, first of all, we have to break a limitation. The soul we are in now is not necessarily in human form. It's just that we are used to existing in human form. As he spoke, he saw Song Kaiyuan turn into a ball-like body. Then, the ball turned into a merman, and even a crab. In the end, when Song Kaiyuan returned to his human form, he said, so, the way a soul body appears is not fixed. Soul bodies can also be separated. As he spoke, he saw Song Kaiyuan split into a few more groups. In fact, from one Song Kaiyuan, there were now 3 Song Kaiyuans. The 3 Song Kaiyuans said at the same time, don't rigidly adhere to form, don't cling to strength. A soul body was a soul body after all. It was impossible to maintain a complete soul body while also displaying a soul body's combat style. That's because the power you need to fight comes from your soul itself. Usually, it was because the soul was relatively weak. Therefore, most people would not separate their souls from their bodies. If he was hunted, his soul would dissipate and his soul would be destroyed. Therefore, most people would not be willing to appear in the form of a spirit body if they could not control it at will. Song Kaiyuan's explanation made Han Fei immediately realize his problem. Previously, Han Fei regarded his soul as his body. Then, he wanted to burst out power from this body, however, this was not the case. If he wanted to burst out power, he needed to use his current soul body as the source of the burst of power. With a thought, Han Fei's body suddenly turned into a mist. In an instant, Han Fei mastered the essence of the soul body. This was similar to the body of black mist or the body of white mist. As Han Fei pointed with his hands, a piece of flesh seemed to be torn off from his body. It dimmed a little, and then a saber radiance swept out. With a thought from Han Fei, the knife light flew back and pierced into his body again. The overall power of the soul body was not weakened, but the way of combat skills was changed. Han Fei smiled and said, "So that's how it is." Song Kaiyuan, for this, the 2 million ultra-quality spiritual stones you and Mushue Cc owe me will be forgiven. Compared with the 2 million ultra-quality spiritual stones, being able to understand the true meaning of the soul body at this moment was of great help to Han Fei. Song Kaiyuan smiled and said, "This is not difficult to understand. It's just that you don't have time to comprehend the use of the power of the soul. That's why you don't understand it here. As long as someone has used it, you can basically understand it when you see it." Han Fei, however, said indifferently, Han Fei, never take benefits for free. Okay, you don't seem to be relaxed. It's time for me to go to the upper floor. Song Kaiyuan was speechless. He saw the bronze gate, but he couldn't go there just because he wanted to. This was similar to the situation he encountered in the land of the King Grave. However, that time was a physical trial. This time, it was a divine soul trial. 3,000 meters corresponded to 3,000 steps, and the conditions to pass were the same. However, Han Fei took one step and walked up the steps. Seeing this, Song Kaiyuan couldn't help but be envious and murmured, "In the end, he's still strong. Even his soul body is so strong. This time, will he also be able to enter the bronze gate?" Enlightened by Song Kaiyuan, Han Fei couldn't wait to climb up. Of course, Han Fei immediately passed it. In the end, this so-called soul body trial was actually a trial of one's Taoist heart. This level was a test of one's Taoist heart. As long as one's Taoist heart was strong, the suppression of the soul body and the soul sea hell were nothing. When Han Fei came to the 2000th floor, the barrier was broken. Immediately, Han Fei felt that his soul was as hot as boiling water. It was burning before, but now it was boiling. However, compared with practicing the indestructible overlord body and being burned by the heavenly fire, this pain was nothing. Han Fei raised his head, only to see countless people standing on the steps. The faces of these figures could not be seen. They were like shadows, like mist. When Han Fei appeared here, a black shadow rushed over from the nearest place, less than 100 meters away. This figure was holding a black knife shadow and rushing over. Han Fei didn't have any actual combat experience as a soul body. How could he hold back? If this figure was very strong and he slacked off, resulting in him not being able to enter the Void Temple, wouldn't he suffer a loss? Fortunately, Han Fei drew out the soul knife and slashed with the draw technique. With one blow, the figure on the opposite side directly collapsed, unable to resist Han Fei's domineering blow at all. However, even so, Han Fei still found that his soul was still slightly damaged when his soul body collided. This was like the collision of weapons. Even if there was a scratch, it was still a scratch. However, Han Fei didn't care. It wasn't the first time that his soul had been seriously damaged. This kind of minor injury was just a drizzle. When his soul body was damaged, how many venerables did he hunt and how many hardships did he go through to make up for it? Now, after a try, Han Fei found that this so-called opponent was far less powerful than he thought. Along the way, when figures rushed at him one after another, Han Fei smashed them again and again. Han Fei found that with his Taoist heart, this level of trial could only make him tired but not hurt him at all. It was as if this divine soul trial was teaching him how to use his soul to fight, how to describe the firmness of his Taoist heart. On the 2500th step, every time Han Fei took a step up, his soul body would be like a clay figurine that was about to collapse, and his feet began to break. That kind of experience was like a person walking, and one of his feet was gone. When he took another step, the other foot was gone. When a clay figurine passed through water, in the end, its body would melt. However, under his strong willpower, his lost foot was attached to Han Fei's body again. If it were an ordinary person, he would have turned into a pool of mud at this moment. In fact, when Han Fei reached more than 2,900 steps, he really turned into a pool of mud. Han Fei's soul became a pile of mud-like soul body. Every time he surged up a step, it was like a pool of mud climbing up the steps. After climbing up, the mud bulged, and he barely turned into a half-human form. At this moment, there would still be figures attacking him. And the power of the attack was much stronger than at the beginning. Puff! Han Fei's soul body swung the mud, and a terrifying soul attack rushed out. When Han Fei's soul body really stepped on the 3000th step, Han Fei's Taoist heart was not shaken at all. When the soul body condensed into a human form again, Han Fei said lightly, "After all, it's just a trial of my Taoist heart. As long as my heart doesn't waver, what's there to be afraid of in this trial?" Just when Han Fei was about to move forward and push the bronze gate, suddenly, Han Fei raised his head and saw that the portrait on the bronze gate seemed to come to life. Bam! In an instant, Han Fei exploded and turned into a puddle of mud again. However, Han Fei's mind was not in a mess. He only saw that the strong man on the bronze gate with a human head and a beast body seemed to come to life. Vaguely, Han Fei heard a rumbling thunder, reflecting in his mind. All the people of the Void Temple deserve to die. Second update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1850. After all, Han Fei was still conscious. Wasn't this the entrance trial of the Void Temple? Why would such a sentence appear at this point? Everyone in the Void Temple deserves to die. It sounded like the words of an enemy of the Void Temple. Could it be that he had gone to the wrong training field? At this moment, although Han Fei was in a state of explosion, his consciousness was still very clear. Han Fei sensed that a powerful force was obliterating his soul. Yes, Han Fei thought that after reaching the 3000th floor, he could enter the Bronze Gate, which basically meant that he had passed the trial of the Void Temple. But now, the situation was obviously wrong. Even though he rushed to the highest floor, he encountered such a sentence. The other party still wanted to obliterate his soul. Han Fei was in such a bad state that he couldn't even condense a human form. His body seemed to be pressed by infinite gravity, and he was as thin as a piece of paper. But this was not the point. Han Fei felt that part of his soul was slowly losing contact. This really gave Han Fei a fright. Immediately, Han Fei cursed, "I've worked so hard to get here, and you want to obliterate my soul? Don't even think about it." Huh. Han Fei frantically gathered his soul, trying to disperse the pressure on his body. However, no matter how hard Han Fei struggled, he couldn't shake the pressure at all. Even after several hours, Han Fei couldn't feel half of his soul at this moment. This meant that in a few hours at most, his entire soul would be obliterated. He would die. Damn it. Little Calabash, Demon Purification Pot, go up. However, this time, the Demon Purification Pot didn't respond either. Han Fei was furious. He wanted to communicate with Forge the Universe, but Forge the Universe couldn't be opened. With a thought, Han Fei tried to summon the embroidery needle, but he also lost contact with it. But at this moment, in the remnant of Han Fei's soul, a machete was emitting a faint light. The Blade of Hope. Han Fei suddenly had a complicated look. When everything else was useless, there was still the Blade of Hope. As long as there was hope, the Blade of Hope would not be obliterated. Immediately, Han Fei's soul burst into laughter. As long as hope exists, this saber will not break. I'll kill, Buzz, Buzz, at this time, there were more than 500 people on the stairs. However, in their eyes, other than the bronze door, there was only the stairs. However, at this moment, the crowd saw that there were two pillars of light that were suffused with white halos attempting to soar into the sky from below the bronze door. At that moment, the one who was most shocked was Song Kaiyuan. As the second person to arrive here, Song Kaiyuan and Han Fei had met face to face. It was exactly because of this encounter that Song Kaiyuan realized that the movement above was very likely related to Han Fei. But where was that place? That was under the bronze gate, which had already crossed 3,000 steps. After parting ways with Han Fei for so long, he had only reached 2,300. Song Kaiyuan knew in his heart that this wasn't a place that humans could reach at all. Now that Han Fei had gone up, he must have gotten a great opportunity, right? Xia Shaochan frowned. She was the 40th person to come here. As soon as she arrived here, she saw Han Fei standing here. Now, she had jumped over 2,200 steps and surpassed many people, but she hadn't met Han Fei yet. This meant that Han Fei's position was higher. Now, there was an abnormal movement above. The first person she thought of was Han Fei. However, unlike Song Kaiyuan, Xia Shaochan felt that there was an inexplicable depression in her heart. This feeling was very bad. At this time, she gritted her teeth and hurriedly accelerated to climb up. The others, such as Wu Duoshou, Li Xinghen, Wu Hao, Zhang Longyu, and others, all looked solemn at this moment. As strong masters, their self-esteem didn't allow them to fall behind so much. Below, when everyone was struggling to climb up, under the bronze door, a pair of scimitars emitting blazing light supported the space several meters around Han Fei. At this moment, 99% of Han Fei's soul had been obliterated. Han Fei still had hope. At this moment, he was just trying to save himself. However, that kind of power had completely exceeded the current range that the Blade of Hope could resist. Han Fei felt that the light of the Blade of Hope was getting weaker and weaker. Han Fei knew that this was no longer a question of whether there was hope, but that this kind of power couldn't be resisted at all. Hee. Han Fei gathered the last bit of his strength and injected a wisp of his soul into the Blade of Hope. Han Fei said, "Return to the yin-yang heaven with a part of my memory. My body is still here. One day, my incarnation will come back, take back my body, and return to the peak. Even after 1,000 years, what's there to be afraid of? Go." With a thought from Han Fei, the Blade of Hope directly sank into a deep blue color and into time. Shaochen escaped from time and flew towards the savage deep abyss. At the moment when the Blade of Hope flew out, in the martial Emperor city, a young man in a dragon-scale battle suit suddenly opened his eyes. He couldn't help looking in the direction of the Invincible Realm's inheritance, only to hear him murmur, "Escape from time? Is this something that a half-king can do?" At the moment when the Blade of Hope flew away, Han Fei really wanted to look at the steps. If only he could look at Xia Shaochan again. In the face of death, Han Fei found that he was not afraid at all. However, he couldn't imagine where Xia Shaochan would go after he died. "Hey! Girl!" Bam! After Han Fei muttered this sentence, in an instant, his soul no longer had consciousness. It was also at this moment that Xia Shaochan, who was climbing up nervously, suddenly stopped. For some reason, tears began to flow from her eyes unconsciously. Something happened to Han Fei. Xia Shaochan knew that something must have happened. Just at the moment when she was about to explode, suddenly, a crystal teardrop flew past her from behind. When she saw the teardrop, Xia Shaochan's eyes suddenly lit up. There is still hope. The book says that the mermaid's tear means recovery in a desperate situation. Now, the mermaid's tear is gone, there must be hope. Xia Shaochan couldn't help but look at the bronze gate blankly. Beep Han Fei didn't know that the mermaid's tear left his body spontaneously. He had no consciousness now, and his soul seemed to have withered. Somehow, Han Fei felt that he seemed to be standing in darkness. Am I dead? In the darkness, a voice said, "How does it feel to die?" Han Fei froze for a while and said after a while, "I can still speak. Then am I dead or not?" The voice was leisurely. "I just wanted you to comprehend the Taoist heart in the process of dying. I didn't expect you to have so many treasures. Forget it, recover." Han Fei didn't know what was going on. In short, all of a sudden, Han Fei shivered. All of the souls that had lost their senses moments ago suddenly came back to him in an instant. Han Fei's soul quickly gathered. Han Fei rolled over and stood up. And beside him, there was a crystal teardrop. Han Fei's face changed drastically. The mermaid's tear. Did I really die just now? The mermaid's tear directly sank into Han Fei's soul and then disappeared. Just when Han Fei was about to curse, he heard a creak, and the bronze gate slowly opened a gap. When the dazzling white light leaked out from the gap of the gate, Han Fei immediately thought, this trial should be over. Although Han Fei didn't know what the fourth trial was. But now, Han Fei was going to walk through the gate again. His many senior brothers and senior sisters, the arrogant senior brother, the senior brother who threw out a divine artifact, "I'm coming." At this moment, Han Fei felt no pressure at all. He took the lead and quickly stepped into the gate. Just at the moment when Han Fei stepped into the bronze gate, he might not know it himself, but Zhang Luotian and the others in the outside world were all shocked. Zhang Luotian's eyes widened. Has the ultimate trial started? No, the ultimate trial has been passed. As he spoke, a man in a dragon-scale battle suit appeared in front of everyone. Martial King. Martial King. Boss. It was said that he was elusive. In the chaotic ocean, the extremely mysterious city lord of the Martial Emperor City, Martial King, appeared in front of everyone at this moment. The Martial King said, "The fourth trial is an epiphany between life and death. Someone has already passed it. This person is the first person in history to pass it." As the director of the Intelligence Center, Yan Meng couldn't help but ask, "How do you know that the fourth trial has been passed? For tens of thousands of years, we have never seen the fourth trial. Even just now, we didn't see it open." Martial King smiled faintly. Some trials are not for everyone to see. A king is just a beginner. It's nothing. There are some things that even a king can't touch. However, since someone has passed the epiphany, then the bronze gate should naturally be opened. What? Everyone was stunned. The bronze gate was not real, and they couldn't see it now. However, hearing that the bronze gate had been opened, who wouldn't want to witness it? Martial King said, "Don't panic, wait a little longer, the third trial. Please vote." The Martial Emperor City is almost over, end of this chapter. Chapter 1851. The bronze gate opened a gap. Everyone who had not reached the top was inexplicably shocked. Who could be so fast? In the crowd, Wu Duoshou, Li Xinghan, and Xia Shaochan were the fastest. They came late, but they all reached the 2000th step. Among them, Wu Duoshou had already met Song Kaiyuan, and Xia Shaochan was moving forward quickly. Because of the appearance of the mermaid's tears and the opening of the bronze gate, Xia Shaochan was relieved. However, no matter what, it at least showed that there was great danger on the steps. Han Fei even used the mermaid's tears. It could be seen that the crisis there had involved life and death. Inside the gate, Han Fei was looking forward to another lecture. Last time, that eldest senior brother gave a lecture and said that he could disassemble his spiritual energy to 100%. If he could do it again, what if he could comprehend something more novel? When the world in front of him appeared, Han Fei saw the mountain he had seen before again. Han Fei was not completely sure, but he saw the waterfall. However, this time, there were not so many people listening to the lecture. There was only silence in all directions. Clatter! All of a sudden, Han Fei looked back. He saw a mountain-like finger coming from nowhere. The finger tapped in the air. Han Fei felt a clang between his eyebrows, and he was knocked to the ground by the finger. In the void, a giant shadow was sitting cross-legged on the top of the mountain, tens of thousands of meters high, which was horrifying. A gentle voice said, "The trial is for you to comprehend, not for you to bear. Comprehend the path of cultivation in the entrance of life and death. Comprehend life and death when all your hopes are gone. A mere sentence from the side has filled your heart with doubts. How can you be so firm in your Tao heart?" Gulp. Han Fei's heart did a flip. Damn, is this eldest senior brother? Eldest senior brother is really big. After listening to eldest senior brother's explanation, if Han Fei still didn't understand what was going on, he would be really stupid. That was why he had heard the words, "Anyone who enters the Void Temple deserves to die." This was just a bluff. It was to scare him and make him think that he had joined the wrong sect. Only then would he be able to properly experience the taste of death. However, this entrance trial was too fucking insane. Who would use death as a trial? Great, now I've arranged for the Blades of Hope to go back. The mermaid's tears couldn't escape either, but he didn't know if it was useful or not. Han Fei was a powerhouse after all. How could he not have a temper? He immediately said, "Eldest senior brother. Our entrance trial is too much of a scam. I'm already very enlightened, but who would treat life and death as a trial? You talk back." The mountain-like finger gently pointed at Han Fei's head, and there was another clang. With one blow, Han Fei's butt fell to the ground and he moved dozens of meters. Of course, even though this eldest senior brother hit him, he didn't use much strength. Otherwise, even 10 of him wouldn't be able to withstand the pressure of that finger. Han Fei got up quickly and then bowed respectfully to this eldest senior brother. After all, it was a very thick thigh. How many senior brothers were they talking about before? It was a divine weapon that he threw casually. I don't expect eldest senior brother to throw it magically, but it would be great if he could give me some other benefits or something. The eldest senior brother said, "Cultivators ask the heavens and seek the Tao. If the heart is confused, the will is not firm. All kinds of doubts arise from the lack of a firm heart. Forget it, although you haven't comprehended life and death, you've endured it. You've gained something. You'll be considered to have passed this trial." Han Fei's heart trembled, and he raised his head unconsciously. Han Fei clasped his hands and said, "Thank you, eldest senior brother." "Well, eldest senior brother, can you tell me something about our Void Temple? Last time, we didn't even say a few words before everyone left. This time, can you at least tell me something?" However, the gentle voice seemed to be whispering in the sky, "You'll know when you should know." Han Fei rolled his eyes. "Then eldest senior brother, I've finally passed the trial. Please give me some pointers on my shortcomings in this trial. The place where I'm at is barren, scarce resources, and withered cultivation methods. In some of the trials, I barely made a breakthrough after trying my best." Han Fei had made up his mind. "If you don't tell me about the Void Temple, you should at least give me something I want, right? Last time, that senior brother hit me with a divine weapon as soon as he came up. Even if you don't give me a divine weapon, at least give me a spiritual treasure." There was no telling if this senior brother was easy to talk to, but he said without hesitation, "Although you haven't joined the sect yet, if you don't die, you can be regarded as a disciple of the Void Temple. I have 3 arts, all of which are entry-level divine arts. You can choose one of them." Hearing this, Han Fei immediately said, "Can't I choose all of them?" "Shut up. Bada." Without any suspense, Han Fei was hit on the head again and fell to the ground. Han Fei said awkwardly, "Fine, I'll choose one." "Eldest senior brother, what are the 3 arts?" 3 golden pages appeared in the void, and the eldest senior brother's voice sounded. One art is called the Void Sky Observation Technique, which can refine the soul and help you perceive the sky. The Vast Sea race is ranked 11th in the Expansion Sea realm. The second art is called the Void Mortal Refinement Art. It helps to cultivate the physical body. It can be used to refine the body in the void and forge a supreme body. The Vast Sea race is ranked 8th, the 3 techniques are called the Void Flame Refining Technique, which is a technique to control fire and refine weapons. It can be used to cultivate the divine soul and the physical body, and it can also be used to control fire and refine weapons. Ranked 100th among the myriad races in the vast sea. Eldest brother said slowly, "You can choose one, but don't be too greedy." Gulp. Han Fei couldn't help but drool. He had the stainless profound body and was ranked 998 in the sea expansion realm. As a result, the Void Temple had randomly chosen someone who had reached the 8th rank of sea expansion. That was the list of the 10,000 races in the vast sea. That was one of the most powerful cultivation arts in the world. Han Fei was stunned when he heard the eldest senior brother's introduction. With this technique in hand, the world was mine. Once he succeeded, he would sweep across the chaotic azure sea. What else was there to say? And that void heaven observing technique? Motherfucker, this is incredible. It could be said that this was the end of visualization. Cultivating this technique, not to mention anything else, from now on, the strength of his soul wouldn't be lacking. However, these 2 great techniques were ranked extremely high, but their abilities were too singular. However, the art of refining flame in the void was different. Although the ranking was a little low, it was still ranked 100th. Compared to his own Nirmala Xian body, this was 18 levels better. Han Fei's chest rose and fell, and he said, "Eldest senior brother, if I become a disciple of the Void Temple someday, I'll become a disciple of the Void Temple. Can I learn all of these great techniques?" Eldest senior brother became a man of few words at this moment. His voice was ethereal as he said, "Yes." Han Fei swallowed. "Senior brother, I choose the Void Fire Refining Technique." It wasn't that Han Fei didn't want to get a better one, but because in a place like the chaotic Azure Sea, the upper limit of his cultivation method was only about 10,000. For example, the chaotic vital body was already the upper limit of the chaotic vast ocean. Compared to his untainted Xian body, it was much weaker. Now, with this void fire refining technique, he could directly reach the ceiling of the chaotic vast ocean. As long as he was given some time and space to develop, who could resist the chaotic vast ocean? However, Han Fei also keenly discovered one thing, that was, all the great techniques of the Void Temple began with the word void. This made him wonder where the void fishing technique came from. So, Han Fei asked again, "Eldest senior brother, is the void fishing technique a technique of our Void Temple?" Eldest senior brother's voice was ethereal. "Yes." Eldest senior brother didn't seem to want to talk too much with Han Fei. He said, "On the path of cultivation, although it's good to work hard, it's more important to understand. All the principles of heaven and earth, the universe, and the laws of heaven and earth are all in a single thought. Little junior brother, work hard." As soon as he saw eldest senior brother's figure begin to disappear, Han Fei hurriedly shouted, "Eldest senior brother, then where will my next trial be?" The huge figure disappeared without a trace. In the void, there were only echoes left, and the voice said, "It's up to fate. Just be patient." Eldest senior brother left, but a golden page in the void turned into golden rays of light and rushed directly into the center of Han Fei's eyebrows. Han Fei seemed to have lost contact with the demon purification pot here. So, Han Fei couldn't see what this great technique looked like. However, the next moment, Han Fei only felt that his eyes were covered by fog. Immediately afterward, Han Fei opened his eyes again and found that he had appeared on the field outside the martial emperor city. At the moment when Han Fei appeared, a star bead appeared in front of him. It was the 10-star bead that Han Fei got in the first test. However, at this moment, the content of this star bead had changed. It was written on it. Trial completion, 99%. Why was it 99%? Han Fei guessed that there was a reason. That was, he didn't pass the last test by himself, but by passing it. Han Fei glanced around. At this moment, he was alone in the field of the martial emperor city. Oh! Of course, in addition to him, there were also 8 dumbfounded half-king powerhouses and a young man wearing a dragon-scale battle suit. Chapter 1852. The corner of Han Fei's mouth twitched. Wasn't this too high profile? It was said that as long as the trial score was above 95%, one could get the real martial emperor's inheritance. Han Fei didn't know what the so-called invincible inheritance was. However, he had obtained the great technique of the Void Temple. Besides, the one with the best trial score could also get 3 opportunities from the martial emperor city. This gift was incredible. It was equivalent to the martial emperor city owing Han Fei 3 favors. Han Fei immediately put away his surprised expression and slightly cupped his hands at the kings. Greetings, kings. I'm lucky to win this trial. Yan Meng said, the trial is not over yet. However, everyone knew that Yan Meng's words were meaningless. Throughout history, no one had ever gotten above 95% in the trial of the martial emperor's inheritance. Han Fei was the first one. How could he meet a second one so easily? However, no matter what, Han Fei could inherit the martial emperor's inheritance. At this moment, the man in the dragon scale armor glanced at Han Fei and said, since your completion rate of the trial has reached 95%, come with me. Get ready to accept the martial emperor's inheritance. Han Fei was slightly stunned and then said, don't I have to wait until the trial is over? Before the man spoke, Yan Meng said, if Xia Shaochan comes out in advance, we will inform her. Of course, you can also wait until the trial is over to accept the martial emperor's inheritance. However, there are still 7 days before the trial is over. If you don't mind wasting time, you can also wait. Han Fei thought for a moment. Since there was a trial of the martial emperor's inheritance in the martial emperor's city, the martial emperor should have something to do with the Void Temple. However, he had to be wary of others. In Forge the Universe, Han Fei secretly operated the 9-Palace Fate Ruler. When the ruler fell on the hexagram of Great Fortune, he was relieved. Han Fei slightly cupped his hands. Then I'll do as you say. Therefore, the things that eldest senior brother had given him were purely the benefits that eldest senior brother had given him. And the martial emperor's inheritance was the martial emperor's inheritance. The two didn't conflict. Seeing that there were still 7 days left, Han Fei thought, maybe I can still come back after I accept the martial emperor's inheritance. At this moment, King Wu glanced at Han Fei and said, come with me. With a stomp, a complicated formation appeared in the air. As King Wu entered, Han Fei's vision suddenly changed, and he came to a high tower. If Han Fei remembered correctly, this should be the cultivation tower of the martial emperor city. Previously, when he learned about the martial emperor city, he heard that there were some places in the cultivation tower that were not open to the public. However, with so many experts in martial emperor city, how could they not see the two of them appearing so openly? The martial king said, this is not the cultivation tower, but the other side of martial emperor city. You can think of it as a mirror world. Mirror world? King Wu said indifferently, in martial emperor city, only those in the sea expansion realm know of the existence of this world. However, this is only a cultivation ground that I created. It doesn't have any special meaning. Han Fei raised his eyebrows. Was this space created by this man? To be able to open up such a large world, one that was not even in the origin sea, and to be able to bring living people in? Who the hell was this guy? King Wu turned his head, glanced at Han Fei, and said leisurely, the last person to accept the martial emperor's inheritance was me. After 80,000 years, there is finally another one. I hope that the martial emperor's inheritance will be of greater use to you. Han Fei was shocked. This person had obtained the martial emperor's inheritance. In other words, this person had challenged the trial of the martial emperor's inheritance and achieved a score of more than 95%. Basically, this person had at least walked to the Bronze Gate. As for whether he had entered the Bronze Gate, Han Fei didn't know. He said, let's go. The place of inheritance is in the secret realm. After that, King Wu took Han Fei into the tower. In the center of the room on the top floor, there was an array. Han Fei and King Wu stood on the array. With a flash of light, the two appeared in a place that looked like a cave. However, this cave was extremely vast and high. When Han Fei arrived here, he was attracted by a huge statue at first glance. This statue was sitting cross-legged on the ground. Even so, its height reached more than 3,000 meters. Standing in front of the statue, Han Fei was as small as an ant. The point was that this statue gave Han Fei the same feeling that his eldest senior brother gave him. Oh, no, his eldest senior brother was much larger than this statue. The martial king said, "In this world, there is a strange technique called the Dharma body. The so-called Dharma body is a body of laws and principles condensed by the power of the Tao of Heaven. It contains the power of law enforcement, rules, and the Great Way. It is an extremely powerful soul technique. To understand it intuitively, you can think of it as a special combat form, external incarnation, or even a kind of technique." Han Fei's eyelids twitched a few times. Soul technique? Dharma body? King Wu said, "Let me show you once." Han Fei looked at King Wu, only to see a mysterious light burst out of his body. Then, in the void behind him, a giant with a height of 100 meters suddenly appeared. The giant's face was blurred. Its limbs and body were no different from that of a human, very much like the phantom of the god of war that Han Fei had seen before. However, the phantom of the god of war was not so big, and it was just a phantom. This Dharma body looked awesome. Han Fei felt the terrifying power of the Dharma body. Even now, his strength could be said to be the strongest among the half-kings. However, when he saw this Dharma body, he also felt that an extremely heavy burden was on his shoulders. It seemed that as long as this Dharma body pressed down, he could be crushed to the ground. The Dharma body said, "The so-called soul technique, you can understand it as the soul battle technique. The fundamental power of the Dharma body comes from the power of the soul. The soul formation is regarded as the Dharma body. The Dharma body sits in the soul sea, and ordinary soul attacks can hardly shake it. And the fighting time of the Dharma body depends entirely on the strength of your soul. The characteristics of the Dharma body mainly inherit your own characteristics." After that, the Dharma body behind King Wu dissipated, turning into a phantom bit by bit. Han Fei was stunned. Oh my god, this is definitely a super great technique. Before this, Han Fei had never heard of the existence of a Dharma body in this world. Han Fei couldn't help but ask, "Senior, how is the combat power of the Dharma body?" King Wu said lightly, "The strength of the Dharma body is related to your own strength. It represents the strength of your soul. It will not be ridiculously higher than your own strength. But it is still possible to be 50% or several times stronger." Hearing this, Han Fei's heart did a flip. Just now, that Dharma body stood in front of him. That sense of oppression almost made him unable to bear it. This person said that the strength of the Dharma body and the Dharma body were not very different. Didn't it mean that this person was very strong and could definitely be ranked in the top 10 of the Pioneer Sea realm in the entire chaotic ocean? Or Han Fei had a faint suspicion in his heart. Could this person be King Wu? At this moment, King Wu pointed to the huge statue and said, "Back then, I didn't completely pass the trial, so I wasn't an official disciple of the Void Temple. At most, I was just a nominal disciple. Although I couldn't become a member, I had to continue this trial and wait for new people to appear." At that moment, Han Fei shivered. Han Fei looked at this person in astonishment. This person knew about the Void Temple. And he was a nominal disciple. Gulp. Han Fei was sure of his guess. The strongest person in the martial emperor city, the mysterious King Wu, turned out to be a nominal disciple of the Void Temple. King Wu said lightly, "Don't be surprised. Everyone has their own destiny. My destiny ended here, but you started it here." Han Fei couldn't help but say, "Senior King Wu, who can defeat you in the chaotic ocean? You still can't enter the Void Temple." King Wu smiled slightly. "You don't understand. If you can't pass the trial, you can't become a real disciple. This time, if you can't enter the Bronze Gate, you will be the same as me." The gate of the Void Temple will not open for you again. Hiss. Han Fei took a slight breath. Damn, this entrance trial is too fucking strict, isn't it? King Wu said, accept the inheritance. I'm leaving. The martial king disappeared, leaving Han Fei alone to stare at the towering giant stone statue. He stared blankly for a while, then walked straight to the front of the stone statue, onto a round platform that was emitting a dense light. As soon as Han Fei stood on this round platform, suddenly, a golden light rushed directly into Han Fei's mind from above. Boom! Han Fei's mind was abnormally clear. The power of his soul gathered crazily, and finally condensed into a golden little man, which appeared in his mind. The little man emitted a brilliant golden light. When the golden light stopped, some heavenly words popped up in Han Fei's mind. In the end, the information presented in front of Han Fei's eyes was as follows: Firmament Martial Divine Body, Ungraded, Introduction. This technique is also known as the Firmament Dharma Body, a cultivation method for divine fetuses. The Dharma body lives and perishes with the Master. The power of the Dharma body comes from the realm of the Master, the main path of cultivation, the strength of the soul, the firmness of the mind, and the understanding of the Great Tao. Firmament Martial Divine Body, ranked 108th in the Pioneer Sea realm. Deduced Art, Void Dharma Body Deduction Consumption, 100,000 strands of chaotic gas. Note, the stronger the mind, the stronger the Dharma body.